Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Christy Sean. Christy Maria Sean Cody was born on September 3, 1976, in Madrid, Spain, to American military parents. Due to her father's duties as a U.S. Air Force soldier, the family frequently relocated, following him to various European countries before eventually returning to the United States. Sean began her education in New Orleans, Louisiana, but the family soon moved to Texas, then Illinois, and later spent several years in Latin American countries. Although this nomadic lifestyle presented challenges, it also allowed her to develop valuable skills, such as speaking multiple languages and experiencing different cultures. However, during her teenage years, Sean struggled to adjust to new environments, make friends, and settle into new social circles. Just as she would start to feel comfortable, the family would move again, requiring her to adapt to new schools and peer groups. Despite these challenges, Sean developed strong communication skills, which enabled her to quickly find common ground with diverse people. She was known for being a sweet, sociable, and charming young woman. In addition to her social skills, Sean was also actively involved in sports from an early age, participating in gymnastics, swimming, and kickboxing classes for a time. When Christy finished school, her family moved to Baloy, Mississippi, where her father had retired from the military. It was here that she formed lasting friendships and discovered a passion for cooking. She experimented with various recipes, honing her culinary skills and earning praise for her creations. This led her to pursue formal culinary training, completing courses to further develop her talent. While her parents expected her to become a professional chef, Christy also discovered an aptitude for acting. She enrolled in an acting academy in Los Angeles, seizing every opportunity that came her way. She appeared in commercials, performed on stage, and worked as an extra or stunt performer in several high-profile productions. After graduating from the academy in 2000, Christy had yet to land a significant role. Despite her talents and striking appearance, she shifted her focus to her culinary skills and sports, turning these passions into a successful business. Christy is a strong advocate for a healthy lifestyle, offering advice on proper nutrition and developing her own exercise routines to maintain physical fitness. About a year after her TV debut, she founded a successful catering company that provides banquet services and retails prepared culinary products. Her business stands out for its focus on healthy eating and features her own original recipes. Christy's next goal is to start her own farm, which will grow healthy and environmentally friendly produce. This will enable her to expand her catering business while promoting sustainable practices. In addition, she conducts online courses on proper nutrition and develops other projects, further establishing herself as a prominent figure in the culinary industry. In 2012, Christy had a fateful encounter on TV when she met Joseph Timothy Cody, a casting director known as JT, at a studio in Los Angeles. At the time, Christy was auditioning for a culinary show, and JT was responsible for selecting participants and actors for various high-rated projects. There was an instant connection between them. Despite being nearly 7 years older than Christy and in the process of getting a divorce, JT was captivated by her beauty and charisma. He began to pursue her, and Christy was receptive to his advances. Soon, they started a romantic relationship. Joseph and his partner Christy shared a dream of building a life together in North Carolina. They left Los Angeles, selling their businesses and home, and invested in a large plot of land in Leicester. They bought a spacious house and nearly 1-acre property where Christy focused on her blog about healthy nutrition and lifestyle, and Joseph continued to work with TV channels remotely. Their relationship was filled with harmony, and in August 2014, they had a grand wedding attended by hundreds of guests. 3 months later, they were overjoyed to discover they were expecting their first child. They learned they were having a daughter during a routine ultrasound examination and chose to name her Skylar. Everything seemed perfect, but their happiness was short-lived. Christy's mother, who lived out of state, regularly called her to update on her life. However, on March 13, 2015, Christy's mother couldn't reach her, but didn't think much of it. The next day, neither Christy nor Joseph answered their phones. By March 15th, both phones were turned off, which alarmed Christy's mother. She asked a close friend, Cecily, who lived nearby, to check on the couple. Cecily found the cars parked outside, but the front door was locked, and no one responded to her knocks and shouts. She saw the couple's dogs locked in a room through a window and noticed the back door lock had been broken. She immediately called Christy's mother, who then contacted the police. The responding officers found signs of a break-in at the back door and disarray inside the house. Valuables were stolen, including a jewelry box and a breached safe in the bedroom. However, there was no evidence of a struggle, bloodshed, or forced detention. The perpetrator seemed to have taken great care to leave no fingerprints or DNA traces. The relatives held out hope that Joseph and Christy might still be alive, but experienced officers were not optimistic. The investigation struggled to make progress, with no significant clues or evidence found. The missing couple appeared to have no enemies, making it difficult to piece together what had happened. The police decided to question the neighbors to see if they had noticed anything unusual recently. A crucial detail emerged during the investigation into the disappearance of Christy and Joseph Cody. A neighbor reported seeing another local resident, later identified as 36-year-old Robert Jason Owens, throwing a large bundle into a trash bin near the Cody's home on the morning of March 15th. Although the trash had already been taken to the dump, the police wanted to speak with Owens, who was a handyman and friend of the couple. Upon questioning, Owens initially denied any involvement in the couple's disappearance and claimed ignorance about the bundle. However, the situation changed dramatically when the bundle was found at the landfill, containing items from the missing couple's home, including Owens' fingerprints and DNA traces on partially burnt clothing stained with blood. A search of Owens' home revealed charred human skeletal remains in his wood stove, incriminating him in the brutal elimination of his neighbor and his pregnant wife. Despite his initial denials, Owens eventually confessed to the crime after several hours of questioning. According to Owens, the incident occurred on the evening of March 12th, when he visited the Cody's home after getting stuck in the mud. He claimed that while trying to get his car out, he accidentally struck and ran over the couple while sitting in the driver's seat. Panicked, he decided not to call the police and instead covered up the incident. Owens claimed that he broke into the Cody's house, took blankets to move the bodies, and then dismembered them in his own bathroom. He proceeded to burn the body parts in his stove, but packed the blood-soaked clothing, blankets, and footwear into a trash bag and disposed of them in a dumpster. The police were shocked by Owens' cruel actions and eerie calmness when recounting the events. Forensic analysis confirmed that the bone fragments found in Owens' stove belonged to the missing couple. Robert, a man with no family and little contact with relatives, moved to Leicester in 2000 after buying land and building a house. However, his name became linked to a 15-year-old unsolved crime in Asheville, where he previously lived. The crime involved his close friend Zeb Wayne Quinn, who vanished mysteriously at the age of 18. Zeb and Robert had been friends since school and lived nearby. Zeb was undergoing military training and worked part-time at Walmart. On January 2, 2000, Zeb finished his shift and met with Robert, planning to drive to Leicester to buy a new car. However, he never returned home. A few days later, Zeb's car was found parked in another part of town with its headlights on and a heart drawn on the window with red lipstick. The car had damage and scratches with paint particles from another vehicle. Robert, who was the last person to see Zeb, told an implausible story. According to Robert, Zeb asked him to stop the car to make a phone call, saying he received an urgent message on his pager. Zeb drove off to a gas station, returned 10 minutes later looking frantic, and changed their plans. He then drove off in an unknown direction, hitting Robert's car in the process. However, Robert's car also had damage with paint particles from Zeb's car, raising suspicions about his involvement in Zeb's disappearance. Zeb Quinn had been romantically involved with Misty Taylor, who previously dated Wesley Smith. Smith had threatened Zeb, warning him to stay away from Misty or face harm. Although Zeb, Smith, and Owens were questioned, they were released due to lack of evidence. Misty and Smith had alibis, but Robert did not. A large sum of money Zeb had been carrying to buy a car vanished from his car and pager. The investigation suggested that Zeb never received a mysterious message, if any. A strange incident occurred the day after Zeb's disappearance. Someone claiming to be Zeb called Walmart, saying he would be absent from work for a few days due to illness. However, the colleague who answered the call thought the voice sounded unfamiliar, not like Zeb's. The call was traced back to a Volvo plant where Robert worked. When questioned, Owens unexpectedly claimed he made the call at his friend's request the night before Zeb disappeared. Despite further investigation, no new evidence or witnesses were found, and the case remains unsolved, with Zeb Quinn still listed as missing. 15 years after the events, Owens was questioned again, suspected of being involved in his friend Zeb Quinn's disappearance. The case was reopened in June 2015, and the investigation resumed. Although Owens stuck to his original story, the police searched his property thoroughly and found something unusual. In a concrete slab on Owens' property, they discovered a hidden cavity containing small, heavily charred human bone fragments. Unfortunately, the remains were too damaged for DNA analysis, so it was impossible to confirm whether they belonged to Quinn. A neighbor's statement added another surprising detail. An elderly man recalled an incident from January 2000 when Owens had just bought the land and was building his house. One evening, Owens started a fire that emitted a sickly, sweet, nauseating smell, which the neighbor found unbearable due to the wind blowing the stench in his direction. After covering the fire pit with concrete, which raised suspicions, Robert Owens claimed he intended to build a small fountain, but never did. 15 years later, the police arrived at the property, and Owens confessed to a crime, offering a new explanation. He stated that his uncle, Walter Owens, had murdered Misty's boyfriend, Zeb, at the request of Wesley Smith, who was still in love with Misty. Robert claimed he was unaware of the plan at the time and was only asked by his uncle to lure Zeb to a secluded area. According to Robert, his uncle had ordered them to stop their cars in a wooded area and then had Zeb exit his vehicle. Walter then shot Zeb silently and instructed Robert to help dismember and package the body. The body was burned on Robert's property that night and encased in concrete. However, it was not possible to question Walter Owens, as he had died several years prior to Robert's confession. The police found no evidence at the alleged crime scene, and Robert's story seemed unconvincing. He was charged with multiple crimes, including first-degree murder, murder of an unborn child, dismemberment, concealment of evidence, burglary, and robbery, which could have led to the death penalty. The defendant's lawyer argued that their client's depression and mental disorders, which required powerful medication, contributed to their actions. This defense strategy could have led to the defendant being found not guilty by reason of insanity and sent to a psychiatric hospital instead of prison. However, the prosecution and the victim's relatives were not satisfied with this possibility. Meanwhile, the investigation into Quinn's case was ongoing, which could have also resulted in the defendant avoiding punishment. In 2017, the defendant accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to the murders of the Codes in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. As a result, they were convicted of second-degree manslaughter, as well as several other crimes including dismemberment, incineration of bodies, burglary, and robbery. Owens was sentenced to 59 years in prison. In 2022, he reached another plea deal with authorities, this time related to Quinn's case. Although he only admitted to being an accomplice to murder and helping to conceal evidence, he received an additional 12-year sentence, effectively extending his life sentence. After sentencing, Owen spoke to the court, asking the families of his victims for forgiveness. Despite this, he maintained his innocence, blaming an accident and his mental disorder, which he claimed was exacerbated by strong medication. However, the families of Christy and Joseph Cody, as well as Quinn's family, remained unconvinced. They rejected the notion of unintentional murder, believing that Owens acted deliberately and with selfish motives in both cases. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jared Bridegan. Jared Bridegan was born in 1989 in Florida to a modest family as the second of two sons. He and his older brother Adam were close from a young age and grew up together. Their parents were devoted members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As a teenager, Jared met Mallory Bowden at church and they developed a romantic relationship. She would later call him her first true love. However, their religious beliefs discouraged cohabitation before marriage, so when Jared graduated from high school in 2007, they went their separate ways. He moved to Utah to attend college. In 2009, at the age of 20, Jared met his future first wife, Shannon Gardner, at a friend's birthday party. She was 2 years older than him and came from a wealthy family. Shannon Gardner was born in 1987 to Starling and Shelley Gardner, founders of Stampin' Up!, a successful company that produced and sold craft items. By 2010, the family business, based in Salt Lake City, generated $100 million in annual revenue. Shannon's sister, Sarah, holds a management position in the company. As a member of a wealthy family, Shannon grew up with luxuries and never had to work as a chef, despite being trained in the profession. After meeting her partner, they got engaged just a few months later and married in a lavish ceremony in Salt Lake City in early 2010, with her family covering all expenses. Their religious beliefs, which discouraged cohabitation and long engagements, influenced their quick decision to marry. After the wedding, they settled in Utah, where Shannon's parents helped them buy a comfortable home worth around $1 million. They, Shannon and Jared, traveled extensively, sharing their luxurious lifestyle on social media. They received significant financial support from Shannon's parents, who gave them around $10,000 monthly and allowed them to use their accounts freely. After Jared graduated, his in-laws gave him $100,000 to start his own business. In 2013, they had twins, Abigail and Liam, and initially moved to Connecticut. However, when Liam was diagnosed with a heart condition and lung issues, they relocated to Florida, following doctors' advice that the sea air would be beneficial for his health. They bought a comfortable 2-story home near the coast in Ponte Vedra Beach. Shannon managed a popular blog, presenting herself as a devoted wife, caring mother, chef, and fitness enthusiast who loved travel and sports. She regularly visited the gym, prompting Jared to surprise her by hiring a personal trainer. After moving, their marriage began to fall apart, and they soon found themselves in the midst of a scandalous divorce. Despite their efforts to put on a brave face, it was clear that their relationship was troubled. One of the main sources of tension was their differing levels of commitment to their religion. Shannon had grown disillusioned with their faith and stopped attending church, while her husband remained a devout follower. This disparity led to arguments, misunderstandings, and ultimately to the breakdown of their marriage. Shannon grew unhappy with Jared, feeling he was lazy, had gained weight, and wasn't putting enough effort into his business despite taking online courses. However, Jared eventually got a job at Microsoft and worked his way up to a senior manager role. Despite this success, the couple grew apart and started arguing frequently. Things took a turn for the worse when Jared found out about intimate messages between Shannon and her personal fitness trainer. Although Shannon denied having an affair, the trainer admitted to it in a conversation with Jared. Jared then reached out to Mallory Bowden, saying his wife had become distant and emotionally attached to her trainer, but he was willing to forgive her and save their family for the sake of their children. In 2015, after almost 6 years of marriage, the couple started a bitter and dramatic divorce process. They fought over their shared assets and custody rights for their children, with Jared accusing Shannon of infidelity, which she denied, saying the marriage had simply lost its spark. Shannon retaliated by accusing Jared of being cruel and offensive. Shannon and Jared disagreed on how to divide their assets, including their home, cars, and bank accounts. Shannon claimed that most of what they had was given to her by her parents or purchased with their money, since Jared had only recently started working. Jared argued that he was entitled to at least half of their Florida home. The couple also disputed custody of their twins. Shannon accused Jared of trying to manipulate the children against her when he spent time with them, allegedly coaching them on what to say about her and recording their statements to use in court. In response, Jared accused Shannon of invading his privacy by installing hidden cameras in their home, tapping his phone calls, and tracking his movements with a GPS device in his car. Shannon sought full custody of the children and ownership of their seaside home. She claimed Jared threatened to use their children's trust funds for himself. Jared countered by accusing Shannon of tax evasion, alleging that she worked off the books at her parents' company and received large sums of money. After their divorce, Jared and Shannon continued to argue in court for nearly 7 years, despite having shared custody of their children. During this time, they both started new families and had more kids. Jared met Christina, a co-worker at Microsoft, in 2016. At first, their relationship was professional, but they eventually became romantically involved. Christina moved to Florida to be with Jared, and they got married in the fall of 2017. They had their first child, a daughter named Bexley, in February 2019, and their son London was born in August 2021. Shannon got married again in 2018 to Mario Fernandez, a real estate businessman who is 1 year younger than her. They had a son named Michael that same year. The family lived in the same house where Shannon used to live with her first husband, Jared, which was a point of contention during their court battles. Despite the new families, the conflicts between Jared and Shannon did not subside, and they continued to file lawsuits against each other with new demands. Jared wanted to restrict Mario's access to the twins when Shannon was not around, while he wanted his new wife, Christina, to play a bigger role in raising his older children. The last court hearing between Jared and Shannon, which took place 4 months before Jared's death, was extremely tense. They made more accusations against each other and fought over their property rights. Shannon claimed that Jared was preventing her from using the family's more comfortable vehicle to transport the children because he was more concerned with embarrassing her than with their convenience and safety. After the court granted Shannon exclusive rights to the larger vehicle and ordered Jared to pay her $600 in compensation, they established a routine for their children's care. As part of this agreement, Jared picked up their twins on Wednesdays for a family dinner, which often included their younger sister Bexley. Christina sometimes joined them, but after having her baby, London, she prioritized spending time with him and avoided leaving him with babysitters. On Wednesday, February 22, 2022, Jared followed this routine, taking the children to Coastal Cafe after picking them up. After dinner and a walk, he dropped the twins back at their mother's house and headed home, taking his usual 40-minute route. This route included a stretch of road without streetlights that was quite deserted. As he drove cautiously, aware of his 3-year-old daughter sleeping in her car seat, he encountered an unexpected obstacle around 9 p.m. when the sun had set. Suddenly, in the headlights, he spotted a tire lying in his lane. Jared stopped his car to move a tire that was in the road, so he turned on his hazard lights and got out of the vehicle. That's when someone started shooting at him. The attacker was very close and shot Jared multiple times with deadly accuracy before running away. Luckily, the child who was sleeping in the car was not hurt. A person who was nearby heard the shots and carefully approached the scene. They found Jared lying on the ground, bleeding badly. They immediately called the police and ambulance, but unfortunately, it was too late to save Jared. Christina, Jared's wife, had spoken to him just minutes before the attack. He told her he had just dropped off their kids and would be home in about 15 minutes. But when 30 minutes passed, then an hour, and Jared didn't come home, Christina started to worry. She tried calling him again, but this time a police officer answered and told her what had happened. The officer asked Christina to come to the police station in Jacksonville Beach right away. The investigation at the scene revealed that a tire on the road caused Jared's vehicle to stop. After getting out to remove the tire, he was shot. Fortunately, his 3-year-old daughter, who was sleeping in the car, was unharmed, suggesting she was not the shooter's target. The absence of stolen valuables, including a wallet with cash, phone, and tablet, ruled out robbery as a motive. When questioned about potential enemies, Christina mentioned Jared's first wife, Shannon, but declined to make accusations without solid evidence. Unfortunately, there was no surveillance footage due to the lack of cameras in the area. A witness reported hearing the shots, which broke the night's silence, followed by the sound of a vehicle speeding away, although nothing was visible in the darkness. Christina's hint that Shauna might be involved in the crime seemed reasonable at first, but detectives doubted she was directly responsible, given her strong alibi. She was at home with her husband, their twins, younger son, and visiting parents at the time of the incident. Instead, the police focused on reviewing nearby surveillance footage. The cameras showed an old dark blue Ford F-150 with brown trim entering the area about 15 minutes before the incident and reappearing a few minutes after the witness reported the shots. The police asked the public for help in identifying the suspicious vehicle. Jared's family made TV appeals, urging anyone with information, no matter how small, to come forward. The first suspect was arrested, but Shauna and her current husband Mario repeatedly denied any involvement in the murder when questioned by detectives. Shauna openly admitted that her relationship with her ex-husband was complex, but insisted she would never wish harm on the father of her children. In media interviews, she shared how her 9-year-old twins reacted to the news of their father's death. Abigail cried uncontrollably for hours, while Liam was in shock and remained silent for a long time. It's notable that neither Jared's ex-spouse nor his older children attended his funeral. This was because Christina had made it clear to Shanana that she was not welcome at the ceremony, and Shanana had countered that if she couldn't attend, the twins wouldn't go to the burial either. Almost a year after Mr. Brand's murder, the first suspect was finally arrested in January 2023. The police had been secretive about their investigation, only disclosing that it required significant resources and effort. However, their persistence paid off when the dark blue Ford F-150 was involved in an accident and fled the scene before the police arrived. This breakthrough led to an arrest. The police chief and city prosecutor announced that 62-year-old Henry Tienon, an unemployed man with a criminal record, had been charged with several crimes, including second-degree premeditated murder, participating in a conspiracy to commit murder, and setting up an ambush that obstructed the victim. Tienon, hoping to receive a lighter sentence, agreed to cooperate with law enforcement and provide information about the crime. As a result, the criminal partnership began to fall apart, and news soon spread that Tienon had been renting a house with a friend owned by Mario Fernandez. After Tienon pleaded guilty and agreed to testify against Mario, Mario was arrested. There were rumors that Shanana, Mario's wife and Tienon's former lover, was the mastermind behind the murder, allegedly motivated by her long-standing dislike for her then-husband. Despite strongly denying all accusations, Shanana eventually left town, relocating to Washington with her 3 children, just a few months after her husband's arrest. Shanana Gardner Fernandez was arrested on August 17, 2023, at her Washington apartment on the same charges as her current husband. She was extradited to Florida to stand trial with her co-defendants. Her alleged motive was to avoid sharing custody of her 2 children with her ex-husband and to gain control of disputed assets due to complicated relationships. The legal case is ongoing, and all defendants are currently facing legal proceedings. Shanana's husband, Tenan, has pleaded guilty to all charges and is cooperating with the investigation in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence. He is likely to face a minimum of 15 years in prison, which may be equivalent to a life sentence given his age. Mario Fernandez has partially admitted his guilt, but is refusing to testify against his wife, exercising his legal rights. Shanana Gardner Fernandez, however, denies all charges against her. Despite this, prosecutors are seeking the death penalty or life imprisonment without parole. Shanna's children are being taken care of by their grandparents, Starling and Shelley Gardner, as well as her sister, Sarah. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lauren Heike. Life can be unpredictable, filled with both joyous moments and heart-wrenching tragedies. The story of Lauren Heike, 29-year-old from Phoenix, Arizona, serves as a poignant reminder of how fragile our existence can be and how quickly everything can change. Lauren, a beautiful soul with captivating green eyes, had an unwavering faith in the goodness of others. Little did she know that her trust and openness would ultimately lead to her untimely demise. Lauren Heike was born on November 20th, 1993 in Seattle, Washington, into a well-off family. Her father, Jeff, owned a plumbing manufacturing business, and her mother, Lana, worked in real estate. She was very close to her older brother, Ryan. Lauren received her secondary education at Central Kitsap High School in Silverdale, Washington. After graduation, she moved to Phoenix and enrolled at the Gary Manuel Leda Institute, where she studied to become a cosmetologist and skincare specialist. Lauren always took great care of herself and had a good understanding of cosmetics, so her education helped her develop her natural inclinations. She began her career at the age of 18 and built a successful path. Initially, she worked as a customer support representative for 5 years, starting in 2015. Lauren then became a leading manager at the renowned cosmetics company Benefit before working as a cosmetologist at a beauty salon for 9 months in October 2020. She later got a job as a manager at the Center for Aesthetic Medicine. She also planned to follow in her mother's footsteps and try her hand in the real estate field. At the time of the tragedy, Lauren was working full-time as an instructor at a golf club. She was never afraid of difficulties, was responsible, and easily found common ground with people. She was actively developing in the beauty industry, sports, and real estate. Lauren carefully monitored her physical fitness, regularly engaging in fitness activities, and generally led a healthy, active lifestyle. She had many friends and a supportive family. In addition to working in sports and meeting with friends, she adored traveling and hiking. It was because of the presence of picturesque trails that she loved Phoenix so much. Lauren often walked alone, listening to music and enjoying the fresh air, silence, and tranquility of nature. Her favorite route was a path in the northern part of the city, not far from her apartment, where there was almost never anyone around. Understandably, her parents were very concerned about her solitary walks in deserted places, but Lauren herself was convinced that nothing bad could happen to her. According to her family, Lauren had a kind of routine. She would wake up, drink coffee, chat with loved ones and friends, and then go for a walk. She did this every day because she believed that this way she would start the new day with positivity. Unfortunately, she did not realize that her trusting nature and carefree attitude could cause a fatal role. On April 28, 2023, Lauren's morning began as usual. She drank coffee, talked with family and friends on the phone, and went for her usual walk in the northern district of Phoenix, not far from her own apartment. The route passed through a picturesque trail in a calm, quiet, sparsely populated area, and took 15 to 30 minutes one way. The girl left the house at approximately 10:30 a.m. The last time surveillance cameras recorded her was at 10:52, when Lauren was calmly walking along the trail in the park. She was wearing a pink sports top, black leggings, and sneakers. She only had her phone and keys with her. No one saw her again. Lauren was supposed to show up for work at 11:30, but did not come and did not warn about her delay or absence. This was uncharacteristic for a very responsible girl. Colleagues started calling her, but to no avail. Lauren's phone was turned off. Worried friends began sending messages on social networks and calling each other, hoping that someone knew where Lauren was. But no one could say anything because no one had seen her after she left the house in the morning. Around 1 p.m., Lauren's parents, unable to reach her, arrived at her apartment hoping their daughter was unwell and had not gone to work. However, Lauren was not home, though her belongings were undisturbed and the doors locked. No signs of a break-in or struggle were evident. It appeared she had gone for a walk and not returned. Concerned, her family promptly contacted the police to report her missing. Law enforcement responded swiftly, but initial searches proved futile. The sunny day of April 28th, typical for the area, saw few visitors at the park where Lauren was last seen walking. Had someone been present during the attack, perhaps the tragedy could have been averted, but fate dictated otherwise. As hours passed with no word from Lauren, anxiety mounted among her loved ones. Despite extensive searches of the park and surrounding areas, no clues surfaced. Hoping she had simply wandered off or was delayed, family and friends reached out in vain. The next morning, April 29th, around 11 a.m., the worst fears were realized when a passerby discovered Lauren's body. The woman promptly contacted the authorities, who found Lauren's body, riddled with stab wounds, a short distance from the trail in the undergrowth. She lay face up, arms outstretched, clothes torn, blood everywhere. Forensic experts quickly began their investigation. The medical examiner later determined her death on April 28th around 11 a.m. was due to severe blood loss from 15 deep knife wounds, likely inflicted with a pocket knife. The fatal wound to her back suggested a prolonged attack, evidenced by wounds of varying depth and location on her body. Injuries on her hands indicated a struggle, with deep cuts on both sides as she tried to defend herself from the sharp knife. Despite her resistance, the assailant, aggressive and strong, overpowered her unexpectedly. Scratches on her back and torn clothing suggested a surprise attack from behind, knocking her down and repeatedly stabbing her. A footprint from a size 42 to 43 sneaker at the scene likely belonged to the attacker. Signs of an attempt to escape, crawl away, and hide were visible in the area, but unsuccessful. Traces of blood and remains of a struggle near a barbed wire fence showed her desperate efforts to evade the murderer. Her personal belongings, a phone and house keys, were found nearby. There were no wallet or other valuables on her, so the possibility of robbery was immediately dismissed. Lauren's phone was found to be broken. The last calls were made on the evening of April 27th. As no one had heard from her for over a day, forensic specialists conducted a thorough examination of the territory. They discovered an important detail a few meters from the crime scene. Among the branches lay a bloody pocket knife. Experts immediately suspected this to be the murder weapon. A detailed examination of the blade and handle revealed fingerprints and other DNA traces belonging to an unknown man. Hair and epithelium of the killer were also found at the crime scene. Lauren's body and all physical evidence were promptly sent for examination. Simultaneously, investigators reviewed surveillance camera footage. It was revealed that one of the cameras captured the moment Lauren entered the park at 10:52. She was walking alone, listening to music on her headphones. Nothing suspicious was noted. However, a minute later, the figure of a tall, thin man in dark clothes sprinted past the camera, trying to hide his face. Despite this, experts identified him as a young African-American man in a cap, matching the description of the individual found at the crime scene. Another camera positioned at the park's exit recorded the same man swiftly exiting around the corner at 10:59. He attempted to climb over the fence, but got snagged on his clothes, eventually jumping over and losing his cap. The suspect then disappeared in an unknown direction. These recordings provided the investigation with a crucial lead, offering a detailed description of the person to be located. It's notable that the unknown man's appearance in the park coincided with the time of Lauren's murder. The cameras captured the suspect immediately before and after the crime. A meticulous analysis of the footage showed that the suspect moved purposefully and quickly, appearing vigilant as if afraid of being detected. Secondly, he showed up in the park only 30 to 40 seconds after Lauren, clearly following her. Following the crime, he quickly ran away in the opposite direction from the park's entrance, climbing a fence to disappear rapidly. All of this supports the belief that the murder was planned in advance, indicating it may not have been his first crime. He acted swiftly and boldly, attempting to leave no trace. However, in the panic of the escape, he made some errors that led to him being captured partially on camera. The footage from the cameras was promptly shared with Lauren's relatives, but no one could identify him in the video. The shock and sorrow felt by everyone was palpable. Her relatives couldn't comprehend how someone could brutally take the life of their beloved, gentle girl. Lauren had no enemies, conflicts, valuables, or significant sums of money. Her lifestyle was not hazardous, dispelling notions of revenge or robbery. 1 week after the tragic event, the police held a press conference to share details about the evidence found. They asked the public for help in identifying the suspect. Lauren's father, with tears in his eyes, urged anyone with information to come forward. The family also offered a significant reward for any useful leads. The city was worby Lauren's story, sparking a huge reaction. Social media was full of sharing information, search efforts, and volunteer work. At the same time, forensic investigations continued. DNA, fingerprints, and other biological evidence were carefully examined in the lab. Finally, experts struck gold. The suspect's genetic profile matched records in the police database. The system revealed the name, Zion William Teasley, a 22-year-old African-American with a history of criminality. Detectives swiftly delved into Zion's background, unearthing his challenging upbringing in a home marred by addiction and criminality since his youth. In 2020, he was convicted of a series of armed robberies. Zion spent almost a year in prison but was released early for good behavior. He was last arrested in January 2023 for a knife attack on a passerby. However, the victim then withdrew the statement, so Teasley got off with a suspended sentence. At the time of Lauren's murder, he was under police supervision and had to regularly check in at the precinct. The last such check took place on April 27th, the day before the tragedy in the park. With this new information, the detectives began to develop a plan to detain the suspect. They established round-the-clock surveillance on him and discovered that Zion was not working anywhere at that time, spending all his time at home and occasionally visiting some dubious individuals. Obtaining an arrest warrant, the capture group went to Zion Teasley's apartment. The door had to be broken down, but no one was inside. During the search, the police found a bucket of chlorine, gloves, and rags, indicating an attempt to destroy evidence, though he didn't have enough time for it. In Zion's room, they found a suitcase stuffed with clothes, a brand new passport in a different name, and bus tickets to Canada, suggesting a plan to flee the country. Investigators immediately suspected that Zion had found out about the search and was trying to evade justice. A large-scale special operation began with the focus on Zion Teasley being sent to all states. Border guards were alerted to apprehend the murder suspect. Patrols were deployed at railway stations, airports, and highways. Detectives traced the fugitive's phone calls and located him using signals from cell towers. Meanwhile, they also collected evidence, including witnesses who saw Zion Teasley following Lauren before her murder. A thorough investigation into Zion's history uncovered previous assaults on women, suggesting a history of violence. He was arrested for harassing a girl in a club. Prior to that, a girl he was dating wrote a statement accusing him of beating her. Although the case was closed due to lack of evidence, Zion was widely regarded as an extremely aggressive and unbalanced person who held contempt for women, considering them inferior. His social media posts were filled with derogatory language towards women, and there were also photos of knives resembling the murder weapon. Police suggested that Lauren might have been a random victim of Zion's violent tendencies. It was theorized that he spotted her on the street, stalked her, and then attacked her in a deserted place. Some speculated that he may have felt provoked by her attractiveness and apparent vulnerability, a common trigger for individuals with his mindset. Lauren's family, devastated by her senseless death, implored the public to eschew vigilante justice and allow the legal system to handle the case. After a 3-day search, Zion Teasley was apprehended in an abandoned garage on the city's outskirts. During his arrest, he resisted and injured a police officer. Subsequently, during questioning, he adamantly denied any involvement in the crime. However, when presented with surveillance footage from the park, he fell silent and requested legal representation. The prosecution swiftly charged Zion Teasley with intentional murder and kidnapping, citing substantial evidence such as video recordings, Lauren's belongings found in the garage, a knife, and DNA and fingerprints found at the crime scene. As a result, the court ordered that he be held in custody without the option for bail. The trial of Zion Teasley began on June 5, 2023, a highly publicized case in the state's history, capturing the attention of the entire nation. Journalists, activists, and concerned citizens gathered outside the courthouse, eager to observe the accused individual. Accompanied by tight security, Zion entered the courtroom in handcuffs, wearing an orange prison outfit, seemingly indifferent. Lauren's family openly displayed their emotions. Her mother wept continuously, while her father glared angrily at the defendant. Friends of the victim, holding her pictures, also attended the proceedings. The prosecutor argued that Zion Teasley was a dangerous and calculated killer who posed a significant danger to society. He emphasized the audacious nature of the crime and the strong evidence against the defendant, portraying Zion as a misogynistic psychopath who took pleasure in causing harm to women. In contrast, Zion's lawyer sought to prove his client's innocence, questioning the presented evidence and suggesting the involvement of another individual in Lauren's death. The defense attorney advised the jury to make their decision based on facts rather than emotions or public opinion, highlighting Zion's difficult upbringing and the harsh treatment he endured in his family. Zion William Teasley currently faces charges of first-degree murder. In December 2023, the Maricopa County Prosecutor's Office pushed for the death penalty, the harshest punishment allowed by Arizona state law for such a serious crime. The Phoenix Police Department concluded their investigation into the case, with the suspect now awaiting trial. There is no information that would indicate that the attack on Lauren Ha was anything other than a random choice of a victim by the perpetrator. Zion Teasley himself does not admit his guilt in committing this brutal murder. He continues to be held in custody without the right to post bail. The trial of the accused is scheduled for October 2025. It is expected that this will be one of the most resonant trials in the history of the state of Arizona. The tragic death of Lauren Heike shook all of America and became a real shock for her family and friends. She, who loved life so much and believed in the goodness of people, became a victim of a cruel and senseless crime. This murder once again reminded society of the importance of public safety and timely response to alarming signals about the inadequate behavior of certain individuals. This story also showed how important the work of law enforcement agencies is, as they were able to promptly find and detain the suspect and gather the necessary evidence of his guilt. Ahead is the judicial review of this case, which should put the final point and determine the measure of responsibility of the murderer. Society hopes that justice will be fair and that the criminal will receive the most severe punishment. Most importantly, the memory of Lauren Heike should live in the hearts of all who knew and loved her. This girl will forever remain young, beautiful, kind, and sincere. Let her story be a warning to everyone. Value life, be careful, and do not be indifferent to those who are near. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Milica van Doorn. In 1999, 19-year-old Milica van Doorn from Zaandam was the victim of a brutal attack after she missed her bus. It would take the authorities 20 years to catch the perpetrator, a breakthrough that was largely made possible by the advancements in DNA testing methods. Milica came from an ordinary, average family. She lived with her parents and two sisters in Zaandam. Located in the province of North Holland, Zaandam is a city that received city rights in 1811 and is situated on the River Zaan, just north of Amsterdam. Milica was friendly with everyone. Having just graduated from high school with a good reputation, she thought her life was just beginning and a great future awaited her. However, one fateful summer night would change everything. On Sunday, June 7, 1992, Milica attended her friend's birthday party at an apartment in a building that still looks much the same today, except for the taller trees. Although she was having a great time with her close friends, Milica decided to head home before the party ended because she lived in another part of town and needed to catch public transportation before it stopped running. Shortly before midnight, she bid her friends farewell and walked to the nearest bus stop, about 160 yards away, to catch her bus home. The bus stop, like the building, had changed very little over the years, as investigators would later discover. When Milica arrived at the bus stop, she realized the last bus had departed 30 minutes earlier. Although she was familiar with the bus schedule, she had overlooked the fact that due to the Christian holiday of Pentecost, the last bus left earlier than usual. Fortunately, Milica had an alternative way to get home, by taking the train. The train station was located on the same street as the bus stop, about half a mile away. Tragically, Milica never made it home. As she often spent the night at her friends' houses, her parents didn't initially suspect anything was amiss. The next morning, the pastor of St. Joseph's Church, which was near the train station and adjacent to a pond, made a shocking discovery during his morning walk. At 8:54 a.m., he found a body floating in the pond and promptly called the police. The detectives arrived within 5 minutes, and the Van Doorn family was soon overwhelmed with grief and sorrow. The body recovered from the water was identified as Milica's. Upon initial examination, investigators quickly realized they were dealing with a criminal case. Milica's body showed various injuries, including several stab wounds on her neck, face, and body. She was also found partially undressed. The perpetrator had attempted to conceal the body from passers-by by covering it with reeds, but this effort ultimately failed, and the body was discovered. Milica's tragic death was devastating for her family. She was young, with bright hopes for her future, but now her parents were left to grieve her loss. They struggled to comprehend who could have committed such a heinous crime against their daughter and what could have motivated them to do so. Investigators gained clarity about the motive for the crime after performing an autopsy. The medical examiner found semen and pubic hair inside Milica's body, indicating a sexual assault. Although her body was removed from the pond, there was no water in her lungs, suggesting that she died elsewhere and was later attempted to be hidden in the pond. The exact time of Milica's death remained unclear. It was possible that she died shortly after leaving the party, or it could have been hours later. Since her body was in the water, her time of death could not be determined by body temperature. While the pond was where the perpetrator disposed of the body, it was not where Milica met her demise. The police searched for the crime scene, believing that due to the severity of Milica's injuries, there must be evidence left behind. A crucial piece of evidence that could lead them to the crime scene and possibly the perpetrator was the fact that one of Milica's shoes was missing. They distributed flyers informing the public about the missing shoe and urged anyone who found it to contact the detectives. The second shoe was eventually discovered, but that's a story for later. In 1992, DNA technology was still in its infancy, so the DNA samples gathered from Milica's body were of little help to the police. They first questioned Milika's family to see if she had any conflicts with someone, or if there was an obsessive admirer who couldn't accept rejection. However, according to the family, Milika didn't have any enemies and her personal life was uneventful. She dated a peer, and they rarely argued. After learning that Milika had attended a birthday party before her death, investigators decided to interview all the guests who were present. Milika's boyfriend was among those interviewed, but despite numerous conversations, they didn't uncover any useful information. Everyone at the party told a consistent story. Milika had left around midnight to catch a bus back to her neighborhood. In 1992, cell phones were not as widespread, so it was impossible to reach Milika and confirm whether she had boarded the bus or made it home. Having cleared Milika's friends of suspicion, the police began searching for potential witnesses to the crime. They conducted door-to-door interviews with residents in the area where the body was found, gathering a lot of information but few specific leads. Several people reported hearing a woman scream during the night, but the noise stopped quickly, and they didn't think much of it. Other witnesses claimed to have seen a man of Turkish appearance riding a bicycle in the direction of where Milika's body was found. Investigators focused on members of the Turkish community living in the Kogerveld neighborhood, where Milika's body was discovered. Some young men from the community had a history of run-ins with the law, but months into the investigation, the police were still unable to identify a suspect. All the men they questioned denied being near the pond on the night of the crime, leaving the investigation at a standstill. 6 months after the crime, a roofer working on the roof of St. Joseph's Church discovered Milika's second shoe, which had been there the entire time. Since it was impossible to access the church roof without a ladder, it was determined that the perpetrator must have thrown one of Milika's shoes onto the roof at some point, likely while they were at the pond. Any potential evidence that might have remained on the roof, such as marks or signs of a struggle, would have long since been erased by the wind and harsh weather. As the months turned into years, Milika Van Doom's case remained unsolved. This lack of resolution was a constant source of pain for her parents. The fact that their daughter's killer was still out there, living their life freely, while the Van Doom family's lives had been forever altered, was a cruel and bitter pill to swallow. Over the years, the police revisited the case, repeatedly interviewing local residents where the body was found, hoping someone would recall a crucial detail or offer new information. However, this effort yielded nothing. The case also received attention on various TV shows, prompting some to call in with tips. Unfortunately, these leads ultimately didn't bring the authorities closer to identifying a suspect. Despite the setbacks, the authorities had one significant advantage: DNA samples from the perpetrator, which were essentially waiting for advancing DNA testing technology to catch up. Medical analysts believed the perpetrator was likely a Turkish man, probably living in the Kogerveld area in 1992, and between 16 and 30 years old at the time. Around 200 local men voluntarily provided DNA samples, but none of these matched the perpetrators. Almost 20 years after Milika's death, a significant breakthrough occurred in April 2012. A change in Dutch law allowed for DNA kinship testing, a crucial development in the case. By combining evidence from the autopsy, crime scene, and the perpetrator's behavior, investigators created a psychological profile of the killer. According to the police profiler, Milika was an unlucky victim of a deeply frustrated individual who harbored strong resentment towards women. She simply happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The offender likely had a brief, tense exchange with Milika before grabbing her violently and making threats. After satisfying his primal urges, he realized Milika could identify him, so he decided to kill her. In the immediate aftermath, the perpetrator remained silent, possibly feigning illness to avoid social interactions and hide physical evidence of the struggle with Milika. The profiler described the offender as a hot-headed, self-centered individual with few friends and a history of treating girlfriends poorly. Based on this profile, the police believe the killer was between 18 and 25 years old at the time of the crime in 1992. In April 2016, the investigation into Malika Van Doom's case was reopened after a 20-year lull with no significant leads. A new development emerged in June 2016 when a report surfaced naming 2 Turkish men who had lived in Zandvoort in 1992 and had departed shortly after Malika's death. It was imperative to determine whether these 2 men had any involvement in the crime. However, tracking them down in Turkey proved to be a challenging task that took over a year. Ultimately, DNA analysis was conducted, and the results showed no matches between the DNA of the 2 men and the DNA found on Malika's body. In 2017, 25 years after Malika's death, the authorities decided to use DNA typing technology to try to identify the suspect. Scientific tests on DNA samples found on Malika's body revealed that the DNA almost certainly belonged to a man of Turkish descent. Based on this new information, the police contacted 133 men of Turkish origin who lived in the area where the body was found, as well as neighboring areas, in 1992. In November 2017, they asked these men to provide a voluntary DNA sample for research. The Netherlands Institute of Forensic Medicine was tasked with analyzing the Y chromosome pattern, which is the DNA pattern passed down unchanged from father to son. The authorities assured the men that their DNA samples would only be used in the investigation of Malika's case and would be destroyed afterwards. They also emphasized that the men to whom the request was sent were not suspects in the case. Nearly all of the 133 men of Turkish descent who were asked to provide a DNA sample voluntarily agreed, but a few refused. According to the police, 126 out of 133 men gave their DNA. A police spokesman praised the response, saying it was respectful and showed that the men wanted justice and a resolution to the case. It took about a month to analyze the DNA samples, but the wait was worth it. Experts did not find a match for the DNA of the man who attacked Malika 25 years ago among the samples. However, they did find a surprising match, a DNA sample from a man who was related to the perpetrator but was unaware of the connection. On Monday, December 10, 2017, the police announced that they had arrested a suspect in the case. The suspect was a 47-year-old man named Hussein, but his last name and photo were not made public due to local laws. Hussein was one of 7 individuals who had failed to provide their DNA for verification. However, he had an unsuspecting brother who cooperated with the authorities and submitted his DNA, unaware that it would ultimately lead to his brother's identification. By tracing family connections, authorities identified a suspect who evaded justice for 25 years. They obtained a DNA sample from Hussein, which matched samples from the victim's body. Despite denying guilt, claiming possession by an evil spirit, and a secret relationship with the victim, Hussein was formally charged with the crime. Malika's immediate family members testified at the trial. One of her sisters noted that the perpetrator remained silent for years, refusing to come forward, and failed to cooperate with the police when they requested a DNA sample. Additionally, he continued to live freely in the neighborhood, even starting a family with 4 daughters. On December 11, 2018, despite maintaining his innocence, Hussein was found guilty based on DNA evidence in the murder of Malika Van Doorn. The court ruled that Hussein had taken Malika's life to conceal a separate crime, specifically a sexual offense. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison and ordered to pay 10,000 euros in compensation to Malika's family. Notably, Hussein refused to attend the sentencing, choosing to remain in a cell outside the courtroom after being escorted there. In February 2019, Hussein appealed the conviction, which led to his sentence being reduced to 19 years and 7 months. However, his imprisonment was short-lived. On June 13, 2022, Hussein was found dead. According to his lawyer, he died after a workout, and resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Greg Mulvihill. Diana Lovejoy and Greg Mulvihill connected in 2005 through an online dating site, as they were both living far from their families. They quickly formed a strong bond, and soon after meeting, their relationship turned serious. The couple decided to move in together and make San Diego their home. Diana had a lifelong passion for athletics and fitness. During her high school years, she was involved in various sports, and later she became a competitive triathlete. The outdoors and fitness played a significant role in Diana and Greg's relationship, as they both shared a love for nature and the fresh air. In the 2000s, San Diego, California, emerged as a significant player in the tech industry, and Diana and Greg capitalized on the abundant job opportunities that arose. They excelled in their respective roles, with Diana earning a reputation as a highly dependable and skilled professional among her coworkers. In 2005, Diana and Greg met, and 2 years later, in 2007, they decided to tie the knot. They chose Costa Rica as their honeymoon destination, where they learned to surf together at a surf school. During the early days of their marriage, they enjoyed each other's company, going on numerous adventures. As a couple, they shared a passion for life and seized every opportunity that came their way. After their wedding, Diana and Greg moved to Carlsbad, a picturesque suburb north of San Diego. The area offered a range of attractions, including lagoons, hiking trails, hills, and secluded spots. Diana was particularly drawn to the area and felt a sense of contentment when she moved into her dream home. She loved the scenic landscapes and peaceful surroundings. Carlsbad provided the ideal setting for Diana and Greg to begin their new life together. 3 years into their marriage, Diana and Greg's relationship began to shift. Diana started experiencing symptoms of fibromyalgia, a chronic condition affecting millions globally. Fibromyalgia is marked by widespread pain, tenderness, and tender spots throughout the body. Although the exact cause remains unknown, several factors can contribute to its development. Fibromyalgia posed a significant threat to Diana and Greg's marriage. Diana, once highly motivated and active, driven by her passion for work and adventure, struggled to accept the new limitations imposed by her condition. The need to reduce stress and rest frequently was a drastic change from her previous lifestyle, causing significant challenges for the couple's dynamic. In 2011, Greg planned a trip to Santa Cruz, California, to help Diana unwind and take her mind off her fibromyalgia. As a loving and caring husband, Greg recognized the toll the condition was taking on Diana's life. The chronic muscle pain and fatigue had significantly impacted her well-being, making it difficult for her to maintain her job due to limited energy. Eventually, Diana had to leave her career to focus on managing her symptoms. This decision allowed her to dedicate more time to her health and spend more time at home in Carlsbad. Diana's ultimate dream was to become a mother, raise a child, and watch them grow into a confident and happy individual. Despite trying for years, Diana and Greg struggled to conceive. Unfortunately, Diana suffered multiple miscarriages, which took a heavy emotional and physical toll on her. Losing these pregnancies was devastating for Diana. Diana, who didn't have kids, had 2 beloved cats named Lanny and Turtle. Sadly, Turtle fell ill and passed away. To comfort Diana, Greg got her a new kitten, which she named Taffy. This thoughtful gift really helped Diana cope with her loss. After trying for years to have a baby without success, Diana was surprised to find out she was pregnant. Greg was thrilled and couldn't wait to become a dad. Diana felt the same way, as her dream of becoming a mom was finally coming true. In September 2012, Diana gave birth to a baby boy. Greg took time off work to bond with his newborn son. He loved being a father and cherished every moment with his child. Diana, being a devoted mom, always wanted her son to be healthy and happy. However, as time passed, she started to worry that her son might have a similar condition to her fibromyalgia. Greg was certain their son was healthy and saw no reason to be concerned, but Diana disagreed, convinced he was sick. Despite Greg's confidence in their son's well-being, Diana was adamant he was ill and began researching ways to help him. In her research, Diana discovered guanine, a drug similar to Mucinex, often used to treat chest infections. Some people claimed it could alleviate fibromyalgia symptoms. Diana became determined to give her son high doses of guanine, but Greg strongly opposed this, believing it was unnecessary to medicate their son. Their disagreement over their son's health care created tension in their marriage. When Greg suffered a shoulder injury that forced him to quit his job, the tension escalated. With their household income now reduced, Diana took on a sales job to make up for the financial shortfall. She also attempted to earn money through online cooking videos, with Greg handling the camera work, but this didn't generate the desired income. Additionally, Diana appeared in promotional videos for kitty litter, but this failed to provide a significant financial boost. By the time their son was 2 years old, Diana and Greg's relationship was in serious trouble due to their constant fighting and disagreements over their child's health. Diana often expressed her frustrations to her co-workers, complaining that Greg was unhelpful and unsupportive. In July 2014, the police questioned Greg about the abuse allegations Diana had made against him in multiple reports. As a result, Greg was forced to leave the family home, and Diana and their son were allowed to stay. Diana confided in a close friend about an incident in which she claimed Greg had allegedly assaulted her while she was asleep and heavily medicated. She said that as she regained consciousness, she realized Greg was touching her without her consent. Furthermore, Diana made additional accusations, including a claim that Greg had sexually abused their son. Following Diana's allegations of abuse, Child Protective Services became involved in the situation. Greg vehemently denied the accusations, suggesting that Diana was making them up because he disagreed with her about their son's supposed medical condition. As a result, Greg filed for divorce and requested custody of their son. An investigation was conducted into Greg's alleged abuse of Diana and their son, but the detectives found no evidence to support the claims. A judge subsequently ordered Greg and their son to undergo psychiatric evaluations, which found no indication of abuse. Diana confided in friends about her frustration, feeling that it was her word against Greg's and that she was not being believed. Ultimately, the case against Greg was dropped, and he was awarded joint 50-50 custody of their son, which left Diana devastated. Diana and Greg were in the process of divorcing, but Diana's main concern was still being a great mother to their son. She wanted to distance herself from Greg and his drama and start a new, fulfilling life. As part of their agreement, Diana would stay in the house and she would pay Greg his share of the property. By 2016, things had calmed down between the former couple. They had worked out a shared custody agreement, allowing them to spend equal time with their son. However, everything changed on September 1, 2016, when the Carlsbad Police Department received a distress call from Jason Kovac, a friend of Greg's. Jason told the police that Greg had been shot multiple times and was bleeding heavily. A nearby patrol officer from the Carlsbad Police Department happened to be in the area when Jason's 911 call came in and rushed to the scene. Upon arrival, the officer found Jason and Greg on the side of the road. About half a mile from where they stood, Jason told the officer that's where the incident had taken place. After assessing Greg's condition, the officer quickly realized that waiting for an ambulance would put Greg's life at risk. So, the officer decided to take Greg to the hospital in his own vehicle, driving swiftly to get him there as fast as possible. Meanwhile, minutes after the officer arrived, the SWAT team swooped in and started searching the area for the shooter. Despite their efforts, they couldn't find the person responsible for the shooting. At the hospital, Greg was rushed into emergency surgery, where doctors discovered he had a gunshot wound to his chest. Greg survived the surgery, but was put on life support in the hope that he would eventually wake up on his own. As Greg recovered in the hospital, detectives got a chance to interview his friend Jason Kovac, who was still in shock and fearful. However, Jason seemed willing to explain what had happened to Greg. According to Jason, Greg had contacted him the night in question seeking his help. Greg had received a call from a private investigator claiming to have crucial information and documents that could aid him in his ongoing custody and divorce battle with Diana. Although the investigator hadn't given his name, he provided Greg with a specific meeting time and location. Despite initial reservations about the call, Greg's curiosity prevailed, and he asked Jason to accompany him as backup in case anything went wrong. Jason, worried about Greg's safety, agreed to go along. The two of them armed themselves with a flashlight and a child's baseball bat. When they arrived at the designated location, they realized it was in a remote area, making the situation even more challenging. It was extremely dark, with no street lights and no moonlight, as it was a new moon that night. According to Jason, the caller told Greg that the package with the documents was going to be attached to a large electricity pole. When Greg saw the pole with the package, he approached it, shining a flashlight around the area as he walked. As he scanned the surrounding area, Jason noticed that Greg's flashlight had fixed on something in the bushes. Suddenly, Greg shouted, "Gun!" And within seconds, a gunshot went off, forcing Greg and Jason to run for their lives. Jason recalled that they sprinted towards their car, dodging bullets whizzing past their heads. When they reached the car, Jason realized that Greg had been hit by a bullet and immediately called 911. Although Jason couldn't give the detectives a detailed description of the shooter, he was able to lead them to the exact spot where the shooting had happened. When crime scene investigators searched the area where the shooting took place, they concentrated on the electricity pole, where the caller had told Greg to collect a package. It was near this pole that they made a fascinating discovery: an Angry Birds towel, carefully folded into a perfect square. The detectives were left wondering if someone had deliberately left the towel there to make Greg think it was the package he was supposed to retrieve. According to Jason's statement, he claimed to have heard up to 6 gunshots at the scene, but the investigators found no shell casings or weapon. The absence of forensic evidence suggested to the detectives that the person who shot Greg must have had extensive knowledge and experience of shooting. As the investigators searched the area where Greg was shot, they detected a strong, unpleasant smell of feces in the air, which raised concerns among the detectives. Upon further inspection, one of the investigators found a pile of feces next to a used towel. It seemed the towel had been employed to clean up after someone had defecated. The investigators immediately preserved the feces sample and the towel as potential evidence, carefully packaging them and sending them to the nearest crime lab for forensic analysis. There, experts would examine the samples to identify any possible leads or clues related to the shooting. However, the process of obtaining DNA evidence was slow. Creating a DNA profile from the feces sample and the towel took around a month, which posed a challenge for the detectives who needed to act quickly to find a suspect. In the meantime, the detectives continued to investigate Greg's shooting. They thoroughly analyzed all available evidence and pursued potential leads. One of their areas of focus was Greg's estranged wife, Diana Lovejoy. The detectives brought Diana Lovejoy in for questioning at the police department. During the interrogation, they asked her if she knew about a private investigator who had contacted her estranged husband, Greg, regarding their divorce documents. Diana denied knowing anything about this and claimed she no longer spoke to Greg. Additionally, Diana had an alibi for the time of the shooting, stating she was at home with her son. Diana claimed to have no additional information and was unable to suggest any potential suspects when questioned further. After 24 hours on life support, Greg unexpectedly regained consciousness and began to recover. Once his condition improved, detectives interviewed him. The detectives asked Greg about his estranged wife Diana, wondering if she might be linked to the shooting. Greg acknowledged their past conflicts, ongoing divorce, and custody battle over their son, but doubted Diana was capable of such violence. He insisted he had no enemies and no idea who was behind the shooting. During the investigation's early stages, detectives obtained the phone number used to lure Greg to the remote area where he was attacked. Upon closer examination, they discovered the phone was on a pay-as-you-go plan, making it untraceable. However, they managed to obtain information from the carrier, revealing that the cell phone was purchased at a Best Buy near Carlsbad. One of the detectives quickly got in touch with the manager of the Best Buy in question and asked if they could provide information about when the cell phone was bought. The detective also asked if they could get a hold of the video footage of the person who made the purchase. After spending hours reviewing the footage, the manager found the relevant sections that matched the time frame of the purchase and sent the footage to the detectives. While watching the video, the detectives could see that the image was poor quality, but they were still able to identify Diana Lovejoy, Greg's estranged wife, in the footage. This discovery made Diana the main suspect in Greg's shooting, and she was promptly arrested during a traffic stop. Despite her arrest, Diana continued to claim she was innocent. The detective asked Diana about her purchases at Best Buy. Although the detective already knew Diana had bought a pay-as-you-go cell phone, which was linked to the number that had led Greg to his shooting, Diana falsely claimed to have bought a router. The detectives then showed Diana a still image from CCTV footage at Best Buy, which depicted the person who bought the phone, and it looked exactly like her. When confronted with this evidence, Diana admitted to buying the cell phone. After this, Diana's story about her involvement in Greg's shooting changed. She told the detectives that she was afraid of Greg, which led her to buy a gun and take shooting classes at Iron Sights, a local range. While practicing, Diana claimed to have met an instructor, Weldon McDavid, an ex-Marine weapons expert who hosted firearm training videos. He helped her learn to shoot. Diana said she had confided in Weldon about her divorce from Greg and their custody battle. As they grew closer, their friendship turned romantic and intimate. Diana told the detective that she and Weldon had come up with a plan to scare Greg, hoping to put an end to his harassment. According to Diana, Weldon had told her to buy a specific phone, which they used to lure Greg to a remote area. Diana claimed that Weldon's role was only to threaten Greg, not to use violence. She admitted to driving Weldon to the site and picking him up later. However, when she heard police sirens approaching, she asked what was going on. That's when Weldon told her that he had to shoot Greg in self-defense, claiming that Greg had made aggressive moves toward him. Diana denied any involvement in the shooting and said she had never asked Greg to take violent action against her. Despite her denials, she was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Fortunately, Greg recovered quickly from the gunshot wound to his chest and was released from the hospital soon after. However, the news of Diana's involvement as Greg's estranged wife spread, leaving many people shocked and horrified. Weldon McDavid was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. The detectives asked him about his connection to Diana and his whereabouts on the night Greg was shot. Weldon claimed he was at home about 30 minutes away from the crime scene on the night of the shooting. When the detectives asked for a DNA sample, Weldon became nervous, realizing they were onto something. The detectives asked if his DNA could be found at the crime scene, and Weldon pretended to be surprised, saying he just remembered something. Weldon told the detectives that the night before the shooting, he went for a run after eating Mexican food, which had upset his stomach, and stopped to use the bathroom on a dirt road. The detectives got a search warrant for Weldon's house, focusing on the garage and hidden areas. They found a suspicious object in the rafters, which turned out to be a rifle with a live round and 6 spent shell casings. These casings matched Jason Cack's account of hearing 6 gunshots. Weldon was then arrested on charges of attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. After searching Weldon's home, the detectives obtained a warrant to search Diana Lovejoy's house. While examining her computer, they found a peculiar search history. Diana had looked up the term "new moon," which caught their attention. The detectives realized that September 1st, the night of the shooting, coincided with a new moon. This was significant because new moons have minimal ambient light. By analyzing her search history, the detectives concluded that Diana had planned the shooting in advance. Her interest in new moons suggested that she intended to use the lack of light to help her husband's murder. The detectives' findings strengthened their belief that Diana played a key role in planning the shooting. During the investigation, detectives uncovered a motive for Diana to kill Greg. The divorce settlements required her to pay him $120,000 for their house. Faced with the possibility of not being able to make the payment on time, Diana might have thought that eliminating Greg would be easier than settling the debt. The trial of Diana Lovejoy and Weldon McDavid began in October 2017. Weldon testified that he never intended to shoot Greg, claiming his sole intention was to scare him. However, he alleged that things took a turn when he heard either Greg or Jason yell, "I got a gun." Weldon maintained that as a skilled marksman, he would have killed Greg if that was his intention. The prosecution presented an alternative theory. Weldon failed to kill Greg because Greg shone a flashlight in his eyes, disorienting him due to the darkness. The lack of moonlight, thanks to a new moon, had left Weldon sitting in the dark for a long time, affecting his sense of orientation. This ultimately saved Greg's life. The jury found Diana Lovejoy and Weldon McDavid guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. When she heard the verdict, Diana collapsed. Although the state suspects she faked it. Weldon received a sentence of 50 years to life, while Diana was sentenced to 26 years to life. Both defendants maintain their innocence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelly Clayton. Thomas "Tom" Clayton, a notable figure in Elmira, New York, played professional hockey for the Elmira Jackals in the United Hockey League, 2 tiers below the National Hockey League. As a result of his prominent role on the Jackals, Tom enjoyed local celebrity status in Elmira. Known for his agitating style of play, Tom would often provoke opposing players through verbal sparring or physical confrontations on the ice. This assertive and confident demeanor extended beyond the rink, as Tom fearlessly stood up for himself and defended his interests in his daily life. His on-ice reputation as a formidable player preceded him, warning others that he was not one to be easily intimidated. In addition to being aggressive, Tom was also known for his good looks, which made him a magnet for women. Wherever he went, he would use his charm to get what he wanted, never having to pay for a drink or dinner. As a popular hockey player, he was living a life of luxury, enjoying all the perks that came with his fame. Among the many women who came in and out of Tom's life, one person stood out: Kelly Stange. She was different from the others he had met. Born in West Elmira, Kelly had a bold and sassy personality. Her passion for country music took her to Nashville, where she attended college, hoping to become a teacher. After graduating, Kelly's plans took an unexpected turn, and she moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, where she started a new chapter in her life as a cocktail server and model. During the Christmas holiday, Kelly went back home to celebrate with her family and attended a hockey game in Elmira, where she met Tom Clayton. His good looks and skill on the ice caught her attention. After the game, Kelly and Tom ran into each other at a bar, and they instantly connected. Their chemistry was palpable. Although Kelly's friends and family had some reservations about Tom because of his occasional inappropriate behavior, Kelly remained steadfast in her commitment to their relationship. She would defend Tom, saying he was just joking when he made offensive comments, and her love for him blinded her to his flaws. Eventually, Kelly and Tom got married, but unfortunately, Tom suffered a career-ending injury while playing hockey just a year later. After his hockey career, Tom took a regular job at ServPro, a disaster cleanup company, which provided him with a stable income to support his family. Meanwhile, Kelly dedicated herself to caring for their 2 children, Charlie and Colin, and creating a loving home for them. To outsiders, the Claytons seemed like the perfect family. Tom and Kelly appeared to have everything: a successful marriage and 2 kids. They lived in a mountain home that Kelly loved. However, their lives took a drastic turn in September 2015. A devastating event would shatter their seemingly perfect existence. On September 29, 2015, Tom went to his friends Greg and Linda Miller's house to play poker after work, leaving Kelly alone with the children. When he returned home from the game, he made a disturbing discovery. Kelly lay dead on the kitchen floor, covered in blood. Tom was overcome with panic and immediately called 911. The dispatcher told Tom to give his wife Kelly CPR, but Tom, overcome with grief, told the dispatcher that it was too late to help her. At around midnight, a police officer arrived at Tom and Kelly's house. When the officer entered the kitchen, he was shocked by what he saw. Kelly was lying on the floor, dead, with a badly injured face, clearly the victim of a violent attack. There was blood everywhere, making for a horrifying scene. The officer's first priority was to take Tom out of the house and away from the scene. Once they were outside, the officer asked Tom what had happened. Tom said he didn't know the details, explaining that he had come home to find Kelly like that, and his daughter Charlie had told him that there was a burglar in the house. The officer cautiously examined Tom's hands to check for signs of a struggle or any evidence that might suggest Tom was involved in the attack. However, he found nothing unusual. Given the severity of the situation, the officer requested backup. A paramedic soon arrived and confirmed that Kelly Clayton had died. The brutal nature of her death led the police department to launch a thorough investigation. As officers cordoned off Tom and Kelly's home as a crime scene, Tom called Kelly's sister, Kim, to break the devastating news of Kelly's passing. Kim, in shock, rushed to the scene with their mother, Liz. When they arrived, they were met with crime scene tape and flashing patrol car lights, which only heightened their fear and anxiety. Desperate to locate Kelly, Kim and Liz rushed towards the ambulance, hoping to find paramedics trying to save her. However, the officers on the scene refused to let them get close, explaining that Kelly's body was unviewable due to her catastrophic injuries. Kelly's death and the unrecognizable state of her body devastated Kim and Liz, leaving them heartbroken. They burst into tears, their anguished screams filling the air. As the coroner's van arrived, Kim, Liz, and the officers joined hands to pray for Kelly's soul as her body was placed in a body bag and loaded into the van. As the night wore on, the crime scene investigators thoroughly searched Kelly and Tom's house and property, but found no new leads pointing to a suspect. Despite their diligent efforts, they found nothing. The investigators were unable to recover a murder weapon at the scene, but based on Kelly's injuries, they concluded that the weapon was likely small and light. The attack on Kelly occurred while she was peacefully sleeping in the master bedroom on the 2nd floor. The attacker struck her with a blunt object. After being hit, Kelly tried to escape and sought refuge in Charlie's bedroom. A large amount of blood was found in that room, suggesting that Kelly had barricaded herself inside. However, the attack continued, as evidenced by a hole in the landing wall, which appeared to have been caused by Kelly's body being pushed down the stairs. After falling down the stairs, Kelly got up and made her way to the kitchen, where the suspect caught up to her and attacked her again in a violent encounter. The suspect brutally bludgeoned Kelly in the head and face, inflicting severe injuries that ultimately led to her death. Tom Clayton informed the first officer at the scene that his daughter Charlie had reported a robber in the house. However, the investigators who searched the property found no signs of forced entry and no evidence of theft. Furthermore, Kelly's expensive jewelry was still present and untouched, and the safe was intact. Given the brutal nature of Kelly's death, the detective initially suspected a domestic violence dispute. Despite this, Tom Clayton claimed to have an alibi, stating that he was playing poker at his friends Greg and Linda Miller's house for the entire night, which would have made it impossible for him to have committed the murder if his claim was true. When the police questioned Tom and Kelly's neighbor at the crime scene, He said he didn't think the couple had any problems and seemed happy. Later, detectives interviewed Tom about his wife's murder, and he repeated his alibi, saying he was playing poker at Greg and Linda Miller's house that night. The detectives then questioned the other players Tom mentioned, and they all confirmed that Tom was present. Although Tom had a solid alibi, the detectives found it strange that he was very calm considering the situation. They asked him repeatedly if he was involved in Kelly's murder, and Tom denied it every time. The detectives also needed to question Tom and Kelly's 7-year-old daughter, Charlie, who had witnessed the entire assault on her mother. Recognizing the importance of protecting Charlie's well-being, the detectives took a gentle approach. They started by doing fun activities with her, like playing board games, to make her feel comfortable before asking about her mother's murder. When they finally brought up the topic, they asked Charlie to describe what she had seen that night. Charlie said a robber wearing a mask, black shirt, and jeans had broken into their house. The intruder was carrying a white stick that looked like a metal pipe and used it to attack Kelly. Charlie remembered hearing Kelly shout, "Run, Charlie, run," as the attacker pushed her down the stairs. After Kelly was pushed downstairs, Charlie followed and saw the attacker beat her to death on the kitchen floor. Charlie believed her mother was dead, so she lay next to her and hugged her leg during the interview. Despite the traumatic event, 7-year-old Charlie seemed detached from the situation. Charlie told the detectives that the robber who hurt her mommy had the same eyes as her daddy. However, she was convinced her dad couldn't have done it because then who would take care of them? Based on the evidence found at the crime scene and Charlie's statements, the detectives believed that the intruder's intention was not theft, but to kill Kelly. After questioning Tom Clayton, the detectives charged him with second-degree murder in connection with his wife Kelly's death, based on his daughter's description of the intruder resembling him. Tom denied the second-degree murder charge and was released on bail, returning to the home where Kelly was killed. He cleaned up the house and continued to live there. Within a month of Kelly's murder, Tom started having affairs with multiple women, gambling in Atlantic City, and showed no signs of grief. The detectives grew suspicious of Tom's behavior, which they deemed unbecoming of a loving husband mourning the loss of his wife. Despite this, Tom maintained that he loved Kelly and would never harm her, even planning a second honeymoon with her. Tom claimed his GPS records on his work truck would prove he didn't get home until 12:35 a.m., but even after verifying this, detectives still suspected him of involvement in Kelly's murder. During their investigation, detectives questioned Greg and Linda Miller, with whom Tom played poker that night. They said Tom was quieter than usual and spent most of the night texting, but they didn't think he could hurt Kelly. The detectives also interviewed Kim, Kelly's sister, asking if she knew anyone who might want to harm Kelly. Kim mentioned Michael Beard, a close friend and co-worker of Tom's, who often helped him with tasks. Michael knew Tom's family, including Kelly and their children, and had even watched Charlie and Colin when Kelly needed to run errands. Michael had high praise for Kelly and the kids, calling them beautiful people. As well as working for Tom, Michael was also his landlord, since Tom owned the building where Michael lived with his family. Michael paid Tom a monthly rent of $11,000. But things went downhill when Michael got accused of drinking on the job. As a result, Tom fired him. This not only cost Michael his job, but also made his financial situation worse, since he was already behind on the rent he owed Tom. Tom's decision to fire Michael not only affected his job, but also put his home at risk. Tom started eviction proceedings, making Michael's financial struggles even harder. Michael found himself in a tough spot, facing both unemployment and the threat of losing his home. The detectives interviewed Michael Beard at the police station, seeking information about Kelly's murder. Michael expressed sadness over Kelly's death, but claimed he was at home all night. Linda Miller, who hosted the poker game where Tom was present on the night of Kelly's murder, remembered a peculiar incident. Tom had asked to use her cell phone, even though his own phone seemed to be functioning properly. According to Linda, Tom made the call at 10:53 p.m. Upon further inspection, Linda found that the call's details had vanished from her phone's records. It seemed that Tom had deliberately erased the number he called. The detectives obtained Greg and Linda Miller's cell phone records, which revealed the phone number Tom had dialed on the night of the murder. Tracing this number led them to Michael Beard. When the detectives discovered Tom Clayton had contacted Michael Beard on the night of his wife's murder, they brought Michael in for further questioning. Michael, however, continued to deny any involvement in Kelly's murder. The detectives then turned their attention to Michael's partner, Holly. She told them Michael had been out all night on the evening of the murder, leaving their house around 11 p.m. Moreover, Holly revealed that Tom Clayton had previously approached Michael with a proposition: burn down his and Kelly's house for $10,000 with the intention of collecting the insurance payout. Michael decided to confess to murdering Kelly after being confronted with the information. He admitted to killing Tom's wife Kelly, but claimed he did not receive the $10,000 payment they had agreed upon. In his signed confession, Michael outlined the original plan, which involved going to Tom's house and killing Kelly while the children were at their grandmother's. Tom had instructed Michael to use the gas cans in the garage to set the house on fire, allowing Tom to collect insurance payouts for the damage. However, Michael said he did not follow through with the arson and instead fled the scene. After killing Kelly, Michael took the police to the location of the murder weapon, a sledgehammer-type object that was found to have Kelly's DNA on it. He also led them to the area where he had discarded his bloody clothing. Mark Blanford, a friend of Michael Beard, came forward to the detectives and gave a statement about his encounter with Michael on the night of the murder. Michael had asked Mark to help him with a job, offering to pay him $500. Mark claimed he had no idea what the job was, assuming it was probably a drug deal. Mark said that Michael later told him he had to kill someone, and that after Michael got back in the car, he mentioned that the kids weren't supposed to be at home. Michael Beard was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in connection with Kelly Clayton's death. Detectives think that 7-year-old Charlie didn't see her father during the attack, but instead mistook the attacker for her father because of the way he was dressed. Kelly's husband, Tom, had a large life insurance policy on Kelly, which had recently been increased before her murder. Detectives believe the motive behind the murder was this policy, as Kelly would have received a significant portion of Tom's assets if they had divorced. Furthermore, detectives think Tom not only intended to kill his wife, but also wanted his children dead. This claim is supported by Michael Beard, who alleges that Tom confided in him about the planned murders. According to Michael, Tom told him that the children would be at their grandmother's house and instructed him to set the house on fire after killing Kelly. However, when Michael was instructed to set the fire, Tom knew the children would be at home, not at their grandmother's house. This information suggests Tom deliberately planned for his children's deaths, wanting to eliminate any reminders of his life with Kelly and start over as a single, child-free bachelor. Based on the evidence, it appears Tom's actions were driven by a desire to erase his past and start anew. Before his trial, Michael Beard retracted his confession, stating that he did not kill Kelly. Instead, he claimed to have entered the Clayton home and found her lying on the ground, covered in blood. As a black man in a house with a murdered white woman, Michael said he was fearful of being wrongly accused and did not want to be blamed for the crime, so he fled the scene without calling 911. Michael Beard alleged that his signed confessions were coerced, but in 2016, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In a 2020 interview, Michael altered his story again, claiming that he arrived at the Clayton home on the night Kelly was killed and saw a man running from the scene who bumped into him and nearly knocked him down. However, this new statement raised several questions, including why he failed to mention this crucial detail at the start of the investigation. Mark Blanford pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree manslaughter for his role as a lookout during Michael Beard's murder of Kelly Clayton. In exchange for his guilty plea, Mark agreed to testify against Tom Clayton. Notably, Mark had a lengthy criminal record spanning over 30 years, but had never faced such severe charges before. At his sentencing, Mark expressed regret to Kelly's family and friends, apologizing for his involvement in her murder. During Michael Beard's trial for Kelly's murder, the prosecution presented testimony from several women who claimed to have had relationships with Tom Clayton while he was still married to Kelly. One of these women testified that Tom frequently disparaged his wife, describing her as lazy. However, when Tom's defense team responded, they argued that having extramarital affairs did not necessarily make him a murderer. Ultimately, the jury convicted Tom of second-degree murder, rejecting the defense's claims. Today, Tom's children are doing well in the care of their Aunt Kim, who is Kelly's sister. They have a strong support system, which enables them to move forward with their lives despite their mother's absence. As a tribute to Kelly's memory, a park was established in the playground where she would often take her children to play. Her son has even given a special name to one of the benches there, calling it Mommy's Bench. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jonathan Hoffman. Jonathan Hoffman was born in Michigan in 1994 to Jennifer and Michael Hoffman. His sister Jessica was born 3 years later, and from a very young age, the two siblings formed an unbreakable bond and shared a special connection that would last a lifetime. However, Jonathan's parents, Jennifer and Michael, faced significant struggles in their marriage, and their frequent fights often forced them to leave Jonathan and Jessica in the care of their grandmother, Sandra. Sandra, Jennifer's mother, played a crucial role in the lives of her grandchildren, providing a safe, loving, and nurturing environment for them. The children cherished the time they spent with their grandmother, who offered them a sense of stability in an otherwise tumultuous upbringing. In 2008, after years of turmoil, Jennifer and Michael divorced when Jonathan was a senior at Farmington Central High School. Following the divorce, Jennifer made the difficult decision to relocate the family from Michigan to Arizona. This move was particularly hard for Jonathan, who was forced to leave behind the only life he had ever known, including his friends, familiar surroundings, and the comfort of his childhood home. The situation rapidly deteriorated for Jonathan and his family after they moved to Arizona. Not long after their relocation, his younger sister Jessica fell critically ill. Medical tests revealed a tumor in her brain, prompting urgent surgery to remove it the very next day. Although the operation was a success, it entailed a lengthy convalescence, and Jessica spent an entire month recovering in the hospital. Throughout this period, Jennifer dedicated herself fully to her daughter's recovery, neglecting her own needs in the process. This left Jonathan feeling abandoned and lonely, forced to navigate the challenges of adolescence in a new state without the emotional support of his mother and sister. Recognizing the strain Jonathan was under, his grandmother Sandra reached out to Jennifer, deeply concerned about her grandson's well-being. Believing familiar surroundings and old friends would bring Jonathan solace, Sandra suggested he return to Michigan to live with her and her husband Fred. Jennifer worried whether her 74-year-old mother would be capable of caring for him, but Sandra reassured her that she was more than capable. 1 month after the Hoffman family's move to Arizona, Jonathan returned to Michigan and moved in with Sandra and Fred. The homecoming brought Jonathan immense joy and relief midway through his senior year of high school. Thrilled to be back among friends and family, he felt a sense of comfort and belonging he had missed in Arizona. His friends recall that Jonathan was initially shy, but once he opened up, He was a lot of fun and loved to make people laugh. With a zest for adventure, he was always up for trying new things. Although Jennifer deeply missed her son, she embarked on the journey to Michigan to spend 2 weeks with him. During her visit, she was dismayed to discover that Jonathan had been smoking marijuana. However, Jennifer viewed this as a typical phase of teenage experimentation and was confident it didn't involve harder substances. With a heavy heart, Jennifer bid farewell to Jonathan, confident that he would be in good hands with his grandmother. But little did she know, Jonathan was in grave peril, and it was at the hands of his grandmother, Sandra. On May 19, 2017, at 5:27 p.m., Jonathan Hoffman made a frantic 911 call, his voice trembling as he relayed to the dispatcher that his grandmother had shot him and he was dying. The dispatcher sprang into action, swiftly dispatching police and paramedics to Jonathan's residence. As she spoke to him, she tried to reassure him that help was on the way, her voice steady amidst the chaos and fear in his. Suddenly, an ominous silence fell on the line, and for a moment, the dispatcher feared the connection had been dropped, or worse, that Jonathan had succumbed to his injuries. But then, just as her heart sank, she heard a barrage of gunfire erupt from the phone, followed by a pained cry. Jonathan yelled, "Ow!" as his voice cracked with terror, telling the operator that his grandmother had shot him again. The West Bloomfield Township Police Department officers responded swiftly to the scene, arriving at Sandra Lane's house at 5:33 p.m. As they approached, the sound of gunfire echoed from within the residence. Trained to handle such situations, the officers didn't hesitate, taking necessary precautions to ensure their safety. They positioned themselves behind their patrol vehicles, using them as cover from their vantage point. Observing a woman moving inside the house, they issued clear, direct commands, ordering the individual to put their weapon on the ground. After a tense moment, the officers heard the sound of a gun being secured, and with the assurance that the person inside had put the firearm away, they entered the residence. When the police made it inside the home, they found 74-year-old Sandra Lane standing before them, a Glock 17 .40 caliber handgun at her feet. Sandra repeated several times in an eerily calm tone that she had murdered her grandson, stating the disturbing sentiment as fact. One of the police officers asked Sandra why she had killed her grandson, but she remained silent, offering no explanation. 2 minutes after the police arrived, Sandra was handcuffed and placed in the back of a patrol vehicle. Officers entered her home to find the victim, whom Sandra claimed was her grandson, 17-year-old Jonathan Hoffman. Inside the home, the air was thick with smoke, making it difficult to see through the haze as they ascended the staircase. They reached the landing where Jonathan lay motionless, face down on the hardwood floor, dressed in gym shorts and socks. The young man's body was riddled with gunshot wounds to his upper torso. Despite the severity of his condition, the medics managed to detect a faint pulse. With urgency, Jonathan was rushed to Botsford Hospital, where a team of medical professionals worked tirelessly to stabilize his condition. However, their efforts ultimately proved futile, and after 30 minutes of intense medical intervention, he was pronounced dead. After the ambulance rushed Jonathan Hoffman to the hospital, police secured Sandra Lane's home as a crime scene. The 3-level residence was a labyrinth of violence and blood, with nearly every room telling a grim tale. Crime scene investigators arrived, meticulously combing the area for clues to unravel the shocking events. As they descended the basement staircase, they were struck by footprints in the blood-stained floor, crucial evidence carefully preserved. Deeper in the house, the team found 10 bullet casings scattered throughout, each one collected and analyzed. One investigator discovered a bullet hole in the drywall, and the search for more evidence led them to the second floor, where a gun case filled with ammunition was found. While gathering evidence, investigators took extra care to photograph Sandra, capturing her face, arms, and hands as she sat in the patrol car. Sandra became overwhelmed, tears streaming down her face. Amidst the chaos, Fred Lane, Sandra's husband, appeared outside the house with their dog, claiming to have been gone for an hour, a walk he took after Sandra asked him to. Fred was stunned to discover that his wife, Sandra Lane, had confessed to shooting and killing their grandson Jonathan after he was pronounced dead at the hospital. The police faced the daunting task of breaking the news to Jonathan's family that their beloved son had been murdered by his own grandmother. As detectives dug deeper into the case, they learned that Jonathan had been living in Michigan, separated from his parents and sister who resided in Arizona. When the detectives shared the devastating news with Jennifer, informing her that her mother had taken the life of her cherished son, she was left in a state of utter disbelief. It seemed unbelievable that someone who was supposed to love and care for their grandchildren could commit such an atrocity. The fact that Jonathan was his grandmother's favorite made the tragedy even more incomprehensible, leaving everyone wondering how he met his end at Sandra's hands. As the day drew to a close, around 7:30 p.m., the police decided to take Sandra Lane to the hospital for a health evaluation, given her advanced age. While waiting in the emergency room, Sandra maintained that Jonathan had never harmed her, describing him as a kind boy who never hurt anyone. After a medical assessment, the doctors cleared Sandra of any suspicious injuries. With this, the police decided to return her to the patrol car and take her to the police department for further questioning. On May 20th, after midnight, Sandra's attorney met her at the police station before she provided her official statement to the police. Seated alongside her attorney, Sandra sought legal counsel when the detectives eventually met with them. Sandra's story took a dramatic turn at the police station. Contradicting her initial statement at the hospital, where she had claimed her grandson was not involved, she now alleged that she and Jonathan had engaged in a heated altercation involving yelling and screaming. During this confrontation, Jonathan had kicked her in the stomach, leaving her fearing for her life. According to Sandra, Jonathan's behavior had become increasingly erratic and angry of late. He would come and go from her house at all hours, frequently bringing over people she didn't care for. Furthermore, Sandra had noticed that valuables had gone missing from her home, leading her to suspect that Jonathan or his friends might be involved in theft. Sandra also mentioned that her grandson had a history of run-ins with the law. Sandra stated that Jonathan was pulled over by an officer while driving, and cannabis was found in his car. However, this didn't deter him, and he was stopped again by an officer shortly after. This time, he was found to be in possession of Adderall. Sandra also recalled an incident where she had to call 911 due to Jonathan's aggressive behavior. During that episode, he was yelling obscene remarks at her. Despite this, when the police arrived, Sandra persuaded them not to arrest him. According to Sandra, she was compelled to buy a gun due to Jonathan's behavior. Sandra alleged that everything escalated on May 18th when she accompanied Jonathan to the probation department due to his non-compliance with his probation terms. After returning home, Sandra stated that Jonathan threatened to take her car, which led to him attacking her. Since there were no witnesses to Jonathan's shooting apart from Sandra, the detectives faced a significant challenge in verifying her account. Sandra claimed self-defense, prompting the detectives to conduct a thorough investigation into the incident. Their primary concern was ensuring they didn't wrongfully send a 74-year-old frail grandmother to prison for defending herself against a violent teenage boy. The detectives examined the photo taken by crime scene investigators immediately after Sandra confessed to shooting Jonathan. However, upon reviewing the evidence, they found no signs of violence on Sandra, not a single scratch, which would be expected if she had indeed been in a physical struggle. During her court arraignment, the judge ruled that Sandra should be held on bond while awaiting trial at the correctional facility. Paul Walton, the prosecutor on the case, believed the 911 call made by Jonathan clashed with Sandra's self-defense claim. Upon listening to the call, Walton noticed a significant 2-minute and 51-second silence before Sandra fired another shot at Jonathan. Based on his observations, it seemed clear that Jonathan was already severely injured and no longer posed an immediate threat to Sandra. However, Sandra's defense team presented a contrasting argument. They countered that Jonathan still posed a threat despite his injuries. The defense highlighted a portion of the 911 call where Sandra yells, "Let go," implying that Jonathan was still attacking his grandmother, even in his injured state. The defense argued that Sandra was simply an innocent and loving grandmother. They pointed to the end of the 911 call, where Sandra can be heard instructing her bleeding grandson to lie down and promising to get him water, as proof of her compassionate nature. According to the defense, these statements revealed Sandra's true character as a caring and empathetic woman. Prosecutor Walton was perplexed by Sandra Lane. Was she a doting grandmother forced to make the ultimate sacrifice in a desperate situation, or a ruthless killer who stalked her own grandson, callously ending his life in the woods? To uncover the truth, Prosecutor Walton conducted a series of interviews around town. The testimonies uniformly portrayed Sandra as an ordinary, kind-hearted grandmother. She regularly visited the local salon, actively participated in her synagogue, taught Sunday school, and volunteered her time. Her generosity and affluence were also well known. What struck the detectives most was the resoundingly positive feedback from those who knew Sandra. They described her as deeply devoted to her grandchildren, particularly Jonathan. The testimony seemed to starkly contradict the heinous act she had confessed to committing. However, a different narrative unfolded when the detectives spoke with Jennifer, Sandra's daughter, and Jonathan's mother. Jennifer offered a contrasting perspective on her mother's character, contradicting the image projected by the community. She described her mother as a controlling and abusive figure, vastly different from the warm and compassionate person others had portrayed. According to Jennifer, her childhood was marked by constant parental fighting, with her mother physically assaulting her on multiple occasions. Her father's frequent absences left Sandra in complete control of the household, allowing her to behave like a tyrant, prone to violent outbursts. Years later, when Sandra remarried Fred Lane, Jennifer witnessed a significant shift in her mother's behavior. Sandra expressed deep affection for Fred, believing him to be a stabilizing influence in their home. Initially, her controlling nature seemed to subside. However, after Jennifer gave birth to Jonathan, Sandra allegedly attempted to reassert her dominance. Jennifer claimed that her mother's obsession with the baby bordered on an unhealthy level, with Sandra becoming so fixated that Jennifer jokingly wondered if she wanted to kidnap the child. After Sandra was charged with murdering her grandson Jonathan, the community of West Bloomfield surprisingly rallied around her. A significant number of residents believed Jonathan was a drug user who got what was coming to him, sparking a wave of support for Sandra. On social media, community members posted messages of encouragement, affectionately referring to her as Granny and using the hashtag #GoGrannyGo. In this narrative, Jonathan was vilified as a monster, while Sandra was portrayed as an innocent, frail, elderly woman. Jennifer revealed that most of her family had bought into Sandra's self-defense story, effectively disowning both Jonathan's memory and herself. Throughout the ordeal, Sandra's husband Fred stood by her side, offering unconditional support. The medical examiner concluded that Jonathan Hoffman's death was a homicide resulting from the multiple gunshot wounds he suffered. An examination of the wounds revealed stippling, indicating that the gun was fired from varying distances. Additionally, a toxicology report revealed the presence of synthetic marijuana, also known as spice, or specifically K2, in Jonathan's system. At the time, spice was widely available in West Bloomfield, particularly among teens and young adults, who could purchase it at gas stations without identification. There were numerous reports of individuals experiencing adverse reactions to the substance, including violent behavior after consumption. 1 month prior to Jonathan's death, A disturbingly similar incident occurred involving another student from the same high school. Michael Cipriano, a classmate of Jonathan's, murdered his father, Robert, after a heated verbal argument. According to reports, Michael was under the influence of the synthetic drug spice at the time of the attack. Jonathan's sister, Jessica, harbored a deep affection for her brother, but she was also aware of his emotional instability and occasional violent outbursts. Despite her reluctance to consider it, she couldn't shake the suspicion that her brother might have harmed their grandmother, leading her to ultimately shoot and kill him. 2 months after her arrest, Sandra was arraigned in circuit court and indicted on 2 additional charges: possession of a firearm and committing a felony. Furthermore, she faced a distinctive charge known as open murder, which is only applicable in select states such as Nevada and Michigan. This unique charge encompasses both first and second-degree murder. Prosecutor Paul Walton was concerned that the jury might hesitate to convict a grandmother of premeditated murder, so he opted to present the jury with a broader range of options. This decision displeased the defense, who felt that the prosecution was shirking their responsibility. In 2013, Sandra Lane faced trial for the murder of her grandson, sparking widespread national outrage. Many directed blame at the boy's mother, Jennifer, for sending him to Michigan to stay with Sandra. Throughout the trial, the defense portrayed Sandra as a devoted and loving grandmother, but the prosecution disputed her claim of self-defense. They presented telling images of Sandra taken after the shooting, highlighting inconsistencies. Her clothes remained unripped, her jewelry was still intact, and her hair was styled as usual. Moreover, bloody footprints found in the basement, matching Sandra's shoes, implied that she had searched for additional ammunition. After the prosecution rested its case, Sandra's defense team presented their argument to bolster their stance. Sandra's attorney took a calculated risk by allowing her to testify on her own behalf. The attorney believed it was crucial for the jury to hear directly from Sandra herself, giving a first-hand account of the experiences she had while living with her grandson Jonathan in the months leading up to his tragic death. According to Sandra, Jonathan had a history of violent outbursts, often kicking in doors and breaking objects. On one occasion, he even shattered a computer monitor. On the day of the incident that ultimately led to Jonathan's death, Sandra alleged that he struck her in the head, leaving her feeling threatened and terrified. As a result, she decided to retrieve her gun, hoping it would serve as a deterrent to protect herself. Her intention, as stated in her testimony, was not to take her grandson's life, but rather to stop him from getting back up and attacking her again. However, during cross-examination by prosecutor Paul Walton, Sandra's account began to unravel. Under Walton's pressure, Sandra conceded that her motivation for obtaining the gun was not fear for her safety, but rather a desire to get Jonathan to listen to her. This admission severely undermined her credibility as a witness and made it increasingly difficult to argue self-defense. Experts testified that the K2 spice found in Jonathan's urine at the time of his death suggested he was not under the influence of the drug when he died. The presence of the drug in his urine indicated that it had already been metabolized, casting doubt on Sandra's claim that Jonathan was high on the drug and violent. After hearing the evidence presented at the trial, the jury deliberated for 2 days before returning a guilty verdict for second-degree murder and the use of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Sandra was subsequently sentenced to 20 years in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Brianna Marie Schneller. Brianna was a vibrant and diligent young woman who excelled academically as the top student at Everest High School in Washington. She had a passion for Mexican cuisine, music, and dancing, and enjoyed thrilling activities like roller coasters. Her parents, Craig and Lori Schneller, described her as an outstanding individual. Brianna had achieved a remarkable feat by being the only student from Wisconsin to qualify for a prestigious national competition in professional and technical fields. She was set to present her project in Tennessee that summer. Her long-term goal was to pursue higher education in restaurant management and eventually start her own business in the food industry. To gain experience and skills, she worked part-time at the El Mashal restaurant in Rib Mountain. Colleagues, friends, and customers alike appreciated Brianna's kind and responsive nature. With her graduation and upcoming wedding to her fiancé, 22-year-old Sebastian Ramirez, just around the corner, the future looked bright for this ambitious and talented Brianna. At first, Brianna's parents disapproved of her relationship with Sebastian due to their age difference and their belief that she was growing up too fast. However, after getting to know Sebastian better, they came to trust him and saw that he genuinely loved Brianna and was committed to their future together. The couple eventually moved in together, renting an apartment on 12th Avenue in Wa, along with Sebastian's 19-year-old brother, Hugo. From the outside, it seemed like the three of them got along well and lived harmoniously, with many people envying their friendship. Sebastian and his brother also supported Brianna's interests and worked with her at a local restaurant called El Tequila Salsa. One ordinary workday changed everything for Sebastian and Brianna. No one anticipated the horrific tragedy that would soon unfold, shattering their plans and dreams. On the morning of May 2, 2009, Sebastian was the first to wake up, choosing not to disturb Brianna, who was sleeping peacefully beside him. Since it was her day off from school, she didn't need to rush. While Sebastian was in the shower, Brianna woke up and they exchanged sweet greetings, discussing their plans for the day. Meanwhile, Sebastian tried to rouse his younger brother, Hugo, who had stumbled in late the night before after overindulging at a party. After getting ready, Sebastian headed to work, just a 5 to 10 minute walk away. Hugo followed soon after, leaving Brianna alone at home, where she chatted with her mother and attended to her tasks. Hugo felt restless and had a headache, probably from drinking too much the night before. He was struggling to focus and regretted overindulging. To get some rest, he decided to swap lunch breaks with a colleague and headed home at 1:20 p.m. When he entered the apartment, everything seemed normal at first. However, as he walked further, he noticed that his brother's and girlfriend's room was in disarray. What caught his attention was Brianna lying on the floor. Hugo rushed to her and asked what had happened, but she didn't respond. At first, he didn't notice the blood. When he moved the towel that had been covering her face, he let out a scream. Brianna was unrecognizably disfigured. Hugo grabbed the phone to call the emergency services, but his hands were shaking and his mind was foggy. Despite his distress, he knew he had to act. He ran to his neighbor's apartment, a floor below, through tears. Young Ramirez tried to explain what had happened and asked her to call for help. On a Saturday afternoon, emergency services received a call despite it being a day of rest. A woman called on behalf of her neighbor, requesting medical help for Brianna, who lay severely injured on the floor with cuts and a disfigured face, showing no signs of life. Police and paramedics were immediately dispatched. When they arrived at the apartment building, the parking lot was crowded, but one individual, Hugo Ramirez, stood out and approached them. He led the officers to the apartment, where he, barely able to speak, pointed out the shocking scene before them. At the center of it all lay Brianna, her body bearing deep stab wounds on her chest, neck, and wrist. The officers asked him to leave the room while forensic specialists began their examination of the crime scene. The crime scene suggested the victim had been lying there for a while, with dried blood scattered everywhere. Defensive cuts on her arms showed she tried to fight back, but was overpowered. The forensic team found key evidence: a bloody, broken iron on the floor, 2 knives in the sink, one with a missing tip, blood on the soap, and a telling shoe print on the carpet. These details hinted at the brutal attack. No signs of forced entry suggested Brianna knew her attacker or they had a way in without breaking in. Scattered bills, accumulated from work, totaled a substantial sum, but nothing seemed missing. The broken knife tip in her body indicated a violent attack, not robbery. The amount of force needed to break the knife hinted at a strong attacker. Police needed to speak with Brianna's relatives and friends to gather information and convey the devastating news. Craig and Laura Schneller waited anxiously at the police station, unable to reach their daughter after hearing of a tragedy at her home. Their worry turned to dread as officers delivered devastating news, their worst fears confirmed. The loss shattered their lives, dividing their world into before and after. Authorities showed them identification photos, but only those revealing part of her face due to extensive injuries. The confirmation was almost too much to bear. After consulting with the psychologist, Craig and Lori, Brianna's parents, were willing to cooperate with the investigation to help catch the person responsible. They provided as much information as possible about their daughter's life, emphasizing that she had no known enemies or anyone who might hold a grudge against her. Lori was the last person Brianna had communicated with that morning, having messaged her around 10 a.m. to let her know she had taken Brianna's car to the auto repair shop. Brianna responded to the message, which meant the incident occurred after she spoke with her mother and before Hugo arrived, establishing a timeline for the events. The police launched a thorough investigation, starting by interviewing the Rodriguez brothers, Sebastian and Hugo, separately. Sebastian, Brianna's fiancé, reported that he woke up at 9:15 a.m., had a brief conversation with Brianna while getting ready for work, and then woke his brother up. By 10:15 a.m., he was already at the restaurant. He learned about Brianna's death after receiving a phone call. Hugo's account matched his brother's, stating he left the house about 10 to 15 minutes after Sebastian and returned home at 1:20 p.m. because he was feeling unwell and wanted to rest. However, his illness and fatigue disappeared when he discovered Brianna's body. After that, he was in shock, unable to think clearly or react properly, so he ran to a neighbor for help. The Ramirez brothers' statements seemed believable, and their distress appeared genuine. However, the police knew that convincing performances were not enough. They needed concrete evidence to prove their innocence. It was possible that one brother was the killer, and the other was covering for him. To explore this possibility, detectives asked the brothers about their relationships with each other. Sebastian expressed his love for Brianna and his excitement about their upcoming wedding. Hugo was questioned about any potential grudges against his brother's girlfriend, or if they had argued, but he denied any issues. He also clarified that, despite finding Brianna attractive, he had no romantic intentions towards her because he valued his good relationship with his brother and would never interfere with Sebastian's happiness. Hugo considered Brianna like a sister. The police interrogated the brothers for hours, but neither aroused any suspicion. After taking DNA samples, they were allowed to return home. Detectives verified the brothers' alibis by interviewing El Tequila Salsa restaurant employees and reviewing surveillance footage. The evidence confirmed their accounts, ruling out a domestic crime. The new focus became identifying Brianna's killer. Was a predator watching her, striking when she was alone? The investigation continued. The autopsy results confirmed the police's initial suspicions. Brianna was hit on the head with a blunt object, then her throat was slit and she suffered multiple stab wounds. The intense attack left numerous, potentially fatal wounds. Despite the brutality, Brianna fought back fiercely, as evidenced by foreign DNA under her fingernails. Initial claims that nothing was missing proved false. Brianna's phone was gone, and Sebastian reported it to detectives. The phone's active signal led police to a nearby restaurant where Sebastian and Hugo worked. The investigation became even more complicated when the brothers provided a solid alibi, and one of them reported the missing phone, which seemed suspicious given the coincidences. Detectives rushed to the location indicated, but instead of a crime scene, they found themselves in the parking lot of a shopping center with a restaurant. After a brief search, they found a plastic takeout bag in a trash bin with the logo of El Tequila Salsa. Inside the bag, they discovered the girl's phone, 2 mismatched gloves, and a pair of women's underwear. One of the gloves was stained with blood. This unexpected discovery changed the direction of the investigation, suggesting that the crime might have been motivated by intimate reasons and involved a predator. The bag and its contents were sent to the laboratory to be analyzed for potential fingerprints or DNA evidence from the perpetrator. When shown a photo of the items, Sebastian identified the underwear as belonging to his girlfriend. The investigation continued, with multiple interrogations of the restaurant staff, and on May 5th, everyone was asked to provide DNA samples and undergo medical examinations to check for scratches or injuries. The police also thoroughly reviewed both internal and external surveillance footage from the restaurant and neighboring establishments. The police faced a significant challenge in identifying who had discarded the bag. Their initial attention focused on a kitchen worker who arrived late to work around the time Brianna's lifeless body was discovered. However, he had a solid alibi, as a traffic stop for speeding en route to the restaurant supported his claim. Fortunately, reviewing surveillance footage greatly aided the investigation. Raul Ponceroa, a 24-year-old kitchen manager, became a person of interest. He left the building at 10:18 a.m. wearing a brown hoodie, but returned without it at 10:53 a.m. Raul claimed he went to pick up friend Luciano, a dishwasher who lived in the same building as the victims. Upon further inquiry, Raul claimed the errand took about 20 minutes, but a discrepancy remained. What happened during the remaining 15 minutes? Raul refused to provide an explanation, while Luciano corroborated Raul's story, stating they didn't stop anywhere on their way to work. Nevertheless, the 15-minute gap continued to trouble detectives, and Raul's behavior raised suspicions, particularly given the unexplained cuts on his hands, which he attributed to working with knives. Raul seemed suspicious, but there wasn't enough evidence to hold him. However, by May 9th, investigators had established a crucial timeline. On May 2nd at 1:16 p.m., a single employee left the back door of El Tequila Salsa, and at the same time, only one person approached the trash bins. It didn't take long to identify the suspect, and surprisingly, it wasn't Sebastian or Hugo Ramirez, as initially suspected, but Raul Ponceroa, the manager. Authorities searched Raul's home, finding intriguing personal items: women's underwear, adult videos, a brown hoodie, and a glove like one found in a trash bin. They sent his DNA for comparison with the plastic bag samples and analyzed a female hair strand on his clothing. With evidence pointing to Brianna, they awaited test results. Once confirmed, Raul was arrested for suspected first-degree murder. Sebastian was stunned, wondering what drove Raul to hurt Brianna, someone they barely knew. Raul had always seemed kind and cheerful, the last person Sebastian suspected of harming anyone. The trial of Raul Ponrocha took place in 2011, following a lengthy investigation. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Raul denied any involvement in the crime and refused to admit guilt. However, the prosecution presented compelling proof, including the presence of Raul's DNA on all key pieces of evidence, such as the iron, knives, plastic bag, and its contents, as well as under Brianna's fingernails. Furthermore, a shoe print found at the crime scene matched the size and pattern of Raul's shoes. Raul arrived at work at 9 a.m. on May 2, 2009, and on his way to the restaurant, he passed the victim's house, which had long fascinated him. Seeing no car, he assumed she was out and took the opportunity to enter her apartment. Raul had a peculiar habit of collecting women's underwear, which was later found under his mattress. After the Rodriguez brothers arrived, Raul left the restaurant, claiming to pick up lunch. Instead, he entered the victim's apartment, easily unlocking the door. He rummaged through her belongings in her room, and when she caught him off guard, he struck her with an iron and slashed her throat with a knife, inflicting multiple injuries. The investigation found that the killer, Raul, took pleasure in the murder, inflicting multiple wounds with different knives. He then tried to cover his tracks, washing his hands and removing his jacket before resuming work as usual. During a lunch break, he disposed of the evidence in a trash bin, unaware he was caught on the kitchen's video recordings. Raul claimed to have met Brianna but didn't kill her, instead implicating a former restaurant employee, Sergio, who he saw at her house on the day of her death. However, Sergio had an alibi, having left the country weeks prior to care for his ill father in Mexico. He testified at the trial, refuting Raul's accusation and disproving any involvement in the crime. Raul's attempt to shift blame failed. The defendant showed no remorse for falsely accusing an innocent person of a heinous crime during the trial. Brianna's relatives, including Sebastian and Hugo, were present and struggled to contain their emotions. Raul Ponrocha was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. He is currently serving his sentence in Wisconsin. Brianna's father stated that her case became personal for many involved, cherishing memories of her. He confessed that her death broke his heart and he lost faith. It is hoped that Sebastian has closed this tragic chapter and moved forward. His brother Hugo later appeared on a TV show discussing their ordeal. Raul's actions were fatal for Brianna, devastating her family's hearts. If he hadn't tried to cover up his tracks, he might have gotten away with clumsy apologies, possibly leading to a confrontation with the Rodriguez brothers. It's unlikely Brianna would have reported him to the police, and even then, the incident could have been resolved with minimal harm. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lindsay Cutshall. Lindsay was born in 1982 in Ohio and grew up in a very religious family. She was an active and adventurous person, interested in sports, hiking, and extreme tourism. She attended Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia and dreamed of founding her own summer camp for children and teenagers. Jason, on the other hand, was born in 1978 in Michigan and also grew up in a deeply religious family. He was interested in hiking tours, mastering survival in the wild, and had leadership qualities. The couple met in 2002 during a hiking trip in Appalachia and immediately felt a mutual connection. They got engaged 6 months later and planned to get married in September 2004, with big plans for their future together. Lindsay and Jason, senior counselors at a Christian summer camp in California, had plans to start their own relationship. In the summer of 2004, they decided to take a weekend trip to the San Francisco area. They informed their colleagues in advance, leaving 2 experienced counselors in charge, and promised to return by Monday. They set off in Lindsay's 1992 red Ford Tempo, but that was the last time anyone saw them alive. By Sunday evening, they hadn't returned, but no alarm was raised, as everyone was confident they would arrive late that night or early Monday morning. However, when they still hadn't returned after the morning roll call at 8 a.m., their colleagues contacted the police and informed the missing couple's families. The police investigation faced a significant problem. No one knew precisely where they had gone. They had planned to explore around San Francisco, and their love for adventure and extreme leisure made it possible they could be in remote areas with no communication or civilization. While the police waited for the legally mandated 2 days, during which the missing were expected to report themselves, relatives and friends organized a search effort. They distributed flyers with photos of the couple and requested anyone who might have seen them to respond immediately. By Tuesday, law enforcement had joined the search operation, focusing on San Francisco, its suburbs, and surroundings. However, the area was vast, making it impossible to thoroughly search it. A friend's suggestion that the couple loved wild, rocky beaches prompted the police to focus on these areas. The search yielded no results for several days, and hope of finding the couple alive was rapidly diminishing. Then, on Wednesday, August 19th, a patrol helicopter flying over one of the rocky, wild beaches reported finding 2 bodies in sleeping bags. The police arrived at the scene to find the red Ford Tempo parked on a cliff near a lookout point and a steep trail leading directly to the beach. The car was identified as belonging to Lindsay Cutshall. Descending the trail to the beach, officers found two individuals in bright sleeping bags. Initially, it seemed like they were just sleeping, but they didn't respond to calls or noise. Upon closer inspection, officers discovered that the sleeping bags contained a young man and woman, both showing no signs of life. A brief examination suggested that they had died from gunshot wounds to the head, and the distinctive smell of decomposition indicated they had been there for more than a day. All of the victims' belongings, including mobile phones, wallets containing bank cards and cash, were found beside them, ruling out robbery as a motive. The keys to their parked car above were also visibly placed, eliminating car theft as a motive. Investigators immediately suspected that the deceased were the same young couple who had gone missing last week near San Francisco. This was later confirmed by documents found nearby, identifying them as Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen. The investigation revealed that the couple's bodies had no signs of physical or intimate assault, except for the gunshot wounds to the head. It appeared that Lindsay and Jason were sleeping peacefully at the time of the incident and didn't have a chance to react or defend themselves. The lack of signs of struggle or escape attempts suggested a swift and brutal act, resembling an execution or vendetta. The questions surrounding the case multiplied, but no answers were forthcoming. There were no signs of anyone else having stayed in the area, and the secluded beach was only accessible via a steep trail. Despite efforts, no shell casings were found nearby, leading investigators to theorize that the shooter either took them or threw them into the ocean. The shots had been fired at close range into the victims' heads, indicated by specific traces. An empty beer bottle from a rare brand, not commonly found in the area, was discovered a few meters from the sleeping bags. Since the victims didn't drink alcohol, it was possible that the bottle belonged to the shooter. This was considered a significant lead, although it was unclear whether it had any connection to the shooter or the crime. One theory proposed that the couple might have had a conflict with someone the day before the tragedy, and their opponent returned at night with a weapon to settle the score. Although Jason and Lindsay were very friendly with everyone, it was possible that they might have inadvertently displeased someone. The investigation considered the possibility that the shooter was intoxicated or mentally unstable. A crucial clue was found in the rare Marlin brand rifle, .45 caliber Model 18, produced in 1994, which was identified from the bullets extracted from the victims' skulls. Based on this, investigators speculated that the shooter was likely a male acting alone, possibly a hunter or firearm enthusiast. To piece together their final hours, investigators analyzed the photos they took and the guest book entries they wrote in the tourist cabin near the lookout point. They had stopped at a fishing pier about 20 miles away, which was confirmed by witness accounts and photographs. They had searched for a place to stay overnight, but found no vacancies in nearby hotels due to the peak tourist season. They then dined at a local restaurant, took a walk, and set off again in the evening. Witnesses reported that they were friendly and showed no signs of conflict. However, they had decided to camp on the prohibited beach, using their sleeping bags instead of a tent, believing they faced no threats on a warm August night. The investigation narrowed down the time frame of the crime to between 11 p.m. on Saturday and dawn on Sunday, when the couple likely went to sleep but did not survive until morning. Initially, suspicion fell on a local drifter who was seen nearby on the evening before the crime, but he was quickly cleared due to lack of evidence and DNA mismatch. The investigation into the double homicide stalled for nearly 2 years until the spring of 2006, when the police decided to release details of the weapon used in the crime and offered a $50,000 reward for any useful information. This led to around 1,000 calls, although most did not advance the investigation. However, the police became interested in 26-year-old Sean Gallen, who was pointed out by several locals. According to them, Gallen collected firearms and bladed weapons, behaved aggressively, and was frequently involved in conflicts, threatened acts of violence, and occasionally damaged other people's property. Gallon was arrested and questioned, but he had previously been on the police's radar for brawling, hooliganism, and driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs. He indeed had an impressive collection of weapons, but the specific rifle in question was not among them. Verifying his alibi from 2 years prior proved impossible, and his DNA did not match the sample found on the beer bottle at the crime scene, so Gallon had to be released. Simultaneously, another suspicious and aggressive drifter, 61-year-old Joseph Henry Burgess, came under scrutiny. He was often seen with a firearm, frightening local residents. It was discovered that in the late 1970s, Burgess lived in Canada, where he joined the Commune of the Children of God, positioning himself as a deeply religious person. However, he soon had a conflict with 2 young people that escalated into outright enmity, and a few weeks later, these individuals were found lifeless, each with several close-range gunshot wounds to the head. Notably, their bodies were also discovered on a beach in sleeping bags, seemingly taken while they slept. By the time the police arrived, Burgess had vanished, and his guilt was proven through numerous left-behind clues. However, he could not be convicted as he had fled to the USA, crossing the border illegally, and managed to evade capture for nearly a quarter of a century. Fast forward to 2017 in Forestville, California, a tragedy unfolded one night on March 14th. Gunshots rang out in the Gallon family home, prompting alarmed neighbors to immediately call the police. The victim was 35-year-old Seamus Gallon, and the perpetrator was his older brother, Sean. An argument had erupted between the siblings, during which Sean, under the influence of prohibited substances, grabbed a firearm and discharged 3 bullets into his younger brother. The police recognized the shooter's name, as Sean had previously been detained as a suspect in a double homicide on a beach, but was released due to a lack of evidence. Since then, he had been on the police's radar twice for property damage and making threats, but had only received fines. It was also discovered that the detainee was an avid hunter and had a hobby of crafting knives and other bladed weapons. Those around him described him as antisocial, aggressive, and unpredictable. After taking his brother's life, Sean attempted to flee but was almost immediately apprehended. Law enforcement reopened the case and took a closer look at a man who was a potential suspect 13 years earlier. On his social media, he had posted pictures of his large collection of weapons and claimed to have telepathic and extrasensory abilities. He believed he was on a special mission, receiving assignments from space, which suggested that he had a disturbed mind. The police suspected that he had serious mental health issues. He refused to cooperate with the investigation, spoke nonsensically, and maintained his innocence. However, when detectives checked the personal messages on his deceased brother's social media page, they found something interesting. Back in 2006, when a $50,000 reward was offered for information on the double homicide case, Sean's former girlfriend had sent a message to his brother, suggesting that she could claim the reward by turning in her ex-boyfriend. They both knew the truth, but kept silent. Unfortunately, it was no longer possible to question either of them, since the brother had been shot and the woman had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. When shown the printouts of the messages between his former girlfriend and his brother, Sean surprisingly confessed and began to give a detailed account of the crime. Despite it being over 13 years since the double homicide, Sean remembered the details of that night vividly. He claimed that he had left his house with a Marlin rifle, intending to hunt in a wooded area. He wandered aimlessly for a couple of hours before descending to a wild beach, which he claimed was a spot to encounter bears. As he walked along the shore, he spotted 2 bright sleeping bags and discovered a young man and woman sound asleep inside. He stood watching them for several minutes before suddenly hearing voices in his head commanding him to end their lives. Sean claimed this was the mission from space he could not ignore. He placed the barrel of his rifle almost against the young man's head and pulled the trigger. The sound woke the young woman, but before she could comprehend the situation, a second shot ended her life as well. Sean Gallen committed a brutal double homicide on a beach. After shooting the couple, he collected the shell casings and took them away in an empty beer can. He then gave the rifle to his father, asking him to hide it. The father buried the rifle in the cellar of his old barn without asking any questions. Years later, when Sean was arrested, he blamed the voices in his head for ordering him to commit violent acts. His defense team claimed he was mentally ill and unfit to stand trial. However, a forensic psychiatric evaluation revealed that although Sean suffered from mental disorders exacerbated by substance abuse, he had deliberately planned and executed the crime. The evaluation showed that Sean was fully aware of his actions and had taken steps to cover his tracks and avoid police detection. This included killing the young man first, knowing the woman would be unable to resist, and taking the casings with him to hide evidence. What was surprising was that Sean's family members and former girlfriend had suspected or known about his involvement in the crime, but none of them had reported him to the police. Sean was eventually tried and sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without parole, plus an additional 94 years for killing his own brother in 2017. He is currently serving his sentence in a special prison unit for dangerous inmates with mental disorders, where he is kept under close surveillance due to his aggressive behavior and claims of hearing voices. The motive behind the double homicide was never established, with Sean simply deciding to end the couple's lives because he saw them sleeping on the beach. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Brett Ryan. Brett Ryan was raised in a loving and prosperous Canadian family with 3 brothers. His parents, Bill and Susan, set a positive example and taught their children valuable life lessons. Bill worked at the Toronto Star daily newspaper and had diverse interests, while Susan managed the household and cared for her family without outside help. The whole family admired Susan, who showed equal love to all her sons. Although Brett seemed to get in trouble less often, it was because he had a talent for talking his way out of difficult situations. He was charismatic and well-liked by his peers. Brett's charm earned him many friends in school, and he went on to attend university after high school. However, he felt pressure to outdo his brothers, so he started a house painting business in the local newspaper. Initially, he did well and made his mother proud, but eventually he realized that it wasn't as fulfilling as he thought and had to drop out of university to focus on it. As his brothers graduated and found jobs, Brett stayed behind with his parents and younger brother, accumulating debt and struggling with depression. By 2007, his debt had reached $60,000, and he struggled to manage his finances, hiding his troubles behind volunteer work and kindness. Desperate and broke, Brett decided to rob a bank on October 28, 2007. He disguised himself with old clothes, a hat, and a scarf that covered his face, and limped into the bank on the outskirts of his neighborhood. After threatening a bank employee, he left with just over $1,000, realizing he would need to rob many more banks to settle his debts. After his first robbery, he was worried that the police would catch up with him, so he avoided going home for a few days. He told his mother he had a job in a nearby town and spent his nights sleeping in his car, periodically sneaking back to his house to check if the police were watching. Fortunately, everything seemed quiet, and no one was looking for him, which made him feel like he was doing things right. As he continued to rob banks, Brett changed his appearance each time. He stopped wearing his old clothes and instead bought second-hand ones or found them in the trash. After each heist, he would burn the clothes he wore. He also bought a fake beard from a costume store to disguise himself. The bank employees he threatened always remembered the bearded man, which helped to create a false identity. The Toronto newspapers wrote about the bearded robber, but Brett never made a large sum of money from his crimes. The most he stole was $3,000. Eventually, his luck ran out, and the police spotted his car on surveillance cameras, following him all the way home. By then, they still didn't have concrete evidence to prove his guilt, so they decided to keep an eye on the suspect. For 15 days, Brett didn't commit any robberies, which was unusual since he typically struck every 3 or 4 days. The police were starting to think they had the wrong guy and were wasting their time. However, their luck changed when Brett left his house, got into a car, and later got out near a bank wearing a disguise. He entered the bank, stayed for a bit, and when he tried to exit, the police were waiting to arrest him. After months of searching, they finally caught the notorious bearded robber. Brett was investigated for 7 months and charged with armed robbery. Interestingly, despite having a permit to carry a gun, Brett never brought a weapon with him during his robberies, not even a kitchen knife. Brett was arrested and faced 19 charges, leading to a prison sentence. He, along with his family, filed multiple appeals, which resulted in 11 charges being dropped. Once eligible, Brett applied for parole and submitted a petition. In it, he explained that he had committed the crimes while struggling with severe depression, resulting from 2 failed relationships and significant debt. Brett emphasized that he had not used weapons and had no intention of harming anyone during the crimes. The parole board accepted his remarks, but required him to undergo a psychological evaluation. This had a positive impact on Brett, and he took the opportunity to reconnect with his family, with whom he had not communicated while incarcerated. The parole board noticed the positive changes in Brett and granted him early release on November 24, 2010. However, his newfound freedom was bittersweet and even more challenging than before. Before his imprisonment, Brett was a painter carrying emotional burdens. After his release, he was a bank robber and ex-convict with a tarnished reputation. After the robbery incident, Brett struggled to find a job due to his notorious reputation. Even people who initially hired him for house painting services would cancel once they recognized him as the bearded robber. To make matters worse, their neighbors, who once admired Susan's garden and frequently visited, began spreading unpleasant rumors about the family. As a result, the Ryan family decided to sell their house and move to Scarborough. In their new location, Susan started a new garden, and Brett managed to find a job at a trading company, although his salary was not high. Fortunately, his parents were able to support him financially as he worked to rebuild his university education. Brett continued to see a psychologist, who consistently advised him to maintain a close relationship with his family. This advice proved to be valuable. Despite this, Brett's financial situation remained a challenge. However, his life took a positive turn in September 2011 when he met Kristen Baxter, a wonderful young woman who owned an apartment with a beautiful sea view. She maintained a healthy lifestyle through sports and didn't concern herself with Brett's past. The couple enjoyed traveling together, including a trip to Australia. Brett's parents were thrilled to see their son happy and believed Kristen would encourage him to reach his full potential and become a responsible member of society. Brett's life was improving, but an unexpected event occurred that threatened to derail his progress. His father's sudden passing was a devastating blow, and Brett's depression began to resurface. To cope, he increased his visits to a psychologist and devoted more time to supporting his mother financially, although his own funds were limited. As their long-term relationship evolved, Brett knew it was time to take a significant step. No longer just careless teenagers, the young couple needed to build a life together. Deeply in love with Kristen, Brett decided to make a heartfelt proposal. He had saved up some money and discussed his plans with his mother, wanting to make the proposal unforgettable and impossible for Kristen to refuse. Susan understood what her son Brett was hinting at, so she gave him money to buy an engagement ring for his girlfriend, Kristen. Previously, the couple had discussed their future together, and Kristen didn't need an extravagant gift to prove Brett's commitment. However, Brett wanted to make a grand gesture and purchased a gold ring with a large diamond for her. Needless to say, Kristen accepted his proposal. Once engaged, the couple began making wedding plans. Brett agreed with Kristen's decisions, but he was shocked by how expensive everything was and how it made him worried about his job security. This motivated him to find a well-paying job to support their future together. He discovered an engineering job opening at a large tech company, created a resume, and applied for the position. After a successful interview, he got the job, which thrilled him. Brett excitedly shared the news with Kristen and his mother, and he even asked his mother for money to buy a fancy suit for his new job. Brett's mother had agreed to buy him a suit for a job interview. However, just after the purchase, the company called to inform him that his application was rejected due to his criminal past, which the security service had discovered. Brett was devastated by the news and felt like giving up. He questioned the point of continuing with the interview process if no one wanted to hire an ex-criminal, regardless of his attempts to reform. Disheartened, Brett decided to abandon his university studies and instead use the money his mother and brothers had given him to finance his wedding to Kristen. He didn't inform his family or counselor about his decision to drop out of university, nor did he share the news about being rejected for the engineering job. Brett created a false image of himself as a successful businessman. He'd dress up in a suit and tie, then change into painting clothes on his way to work. He lied to his relatives, telling them he worked in an office, and supported this fiction by posting photos on social media that he downloaded from the internet. When he was with his family, Brett would often pretend to receive important work calls, making excuses to take care of urgent business matters. He was skilled at deceiving those around him, and no one suspected that he was actually just a house painter. In September 2016, Brett's 5-year relationship with Kristen was nearing its climax as they planned their wedding. He even agreed to rent an expensive restaurant that would cost $100 per guest. The Ryan family was overjoyed, believing that Brett had finally turned his life around, with a prestigious job, a fancy apartment, and a beautiful fiancée. Brett's lies had spiraled out of control, and there was no escape from the consequences. With the wedding only a month away, he had invested heavily in the event. To foot the bill, he repeatedly borrowed money from his mother, and when she could no longer help, he shamelessly demanded that she get a better-paying job. Around the same time, he planned an extravagant bachelor party in August, inviting all his friends and brothers. As his web of lies began to unravel, Brett confided in his counselor about the situation. For a year, he had deceived his family into believing he worked as an engineer for a technology company. The psychologist was dismayed that his longtime client had gone astray again and advised Brett to confess everything to his mother. After much contemplation and procrastination, Brett finally came clean to her. His mother was outraged, having proudly told everyone about her supposed wonderful son. She insisted that Brett reveal the truth to Kristen, threatening to expose him herself if he didn't comply. Moreover, she warned him that his brothers were already aware of the situation and sided with her. Brett couldn't muster the courage to confess to Kristen, having struggled to tell the truth to his mother in the first place. Brett knew the wedding was only a month away, but he remained silent about his lies, even though it would be better for Kristen to know the truth beforehand. He was unsure what he was hoping to achieve by keeping quiet, but he couldn't shake the thought that his mother might expose him to Kristen, causing a scandal. Every time Kristen's phone rang, Brett's heart skipped a beat, fearing it was his mother calling to reveal his secrets. He breathed a sigh of relief when it was just a friend inquiring about the wedding plans. Desperate to stop his mother from interfering, Brett hatched a sinister plan. Because he was not allowed to use firearms due to his previous robbery conviction, he decided to use a crossbow, a silent and deadly weapon. Brett had learned how to shoot a crossbow from his late father, who used to practice target shooting in their garden. Though his father had taught him well, he never intended for Brett to use this skill for harm. Brett purchased the crossbow and arrows from a sporting goods store and hid them away, preparing to carry out his disturbing plan. Brett created an alibi to deceive others into thinking he was at home all day. He rigged a fan to turn on at a set time, which then moved a spoon across his computer keyboard, automatically posting pre-written comments on YouTube videos. On August 25th, Brett dressed in disguise to conceal his identity and left his house through the back door to avoid detection by security cameras. He took a train to his parents' house, intent on taking care of anyone who might threaten his and Kristen's well-being. When Brett arrived unexpectedly at his parents' house, his mother Susan was taken aback. Despite her poor health that day, Brett persisted in trying to convince her not to tell Kristen anything, eventually becoming angry and aggressive. Susan sensed something was wrong and, intimidated by her son's intense behavior, warned him that she had already called Christopher and he was on his way to their location. Brett's anger and adrenaline surged out of control as he ran to the garage to grab a crossbow. However, his emotional state prevented him from making a clear shot, so he instead used the butt of the gun to bludgeon his mother. To ensure she was dead, he placed plastic bags over her body and tightened a rope around her neck. Brett then loaded the crossbow with arrows and hid in the bushes, waiting for his brother Christopher to arrive. When Christopher called out for their mother or brother, Brett shot him in the neck from behind, causing his death within minutes. Susan, their mother, had also called their youngest brother Alexander, who was also shot in the neck, but the arrow didn't go deep enough, and he began screaming for help. Throughout the chaos, Leland was oblivious to the violence unfolding in the garage and garden, unaware that his own brother was committing the crimes. He slept in his second-floor room until a scream disturbed him. Rushing downstairs, Leland found Brett trying to strangle Alexander, and a fierce fight broke out between the two brothers. Once Leland gained the upper hand, he pushed Brett aside and ran to the neighbors to call the police. Brett realized he was trapped in the house with no escape, overwhelmed by the consequences of his actions. He acknowledged that he had ruined his life and there was no turning back. He took out his phone and wrote a letter to Kristen, begging for her forgiveness. When the police arrived, they found Brett sitting next to his brother Alexander, both of them covered in blood. Despite his injuries, Alexander was still alive, but later succumbed to his wounds in the hospital. Brett voluntarily handed himself over to the police, asking to be handcuffed and taken to the station. There, he confessed to the crimes and revealed the location of his mother's body, hidden under packages in the garage. He expressed regret, stating that he had never intended to kill Susan, only to scare her. However, he had planned to kill Christopher and Alexander, using them as witnesses to his twisted scheme. If they hadn't arrived that day, they would still be alive, just like they had been nearly 10 years prior. Brett attempted to justify his actions by citing his depression, but it didn't lessen his punishment. Despite confessing to the crimes without resistance and cooperating with the investigation, he received 3 life sentences, 1 for each murder. He will be eligible for parole in 2041. Leland, the sole survivor of the tragedy, has declined to speak to the press, but he is well known in Toronto for his traumatic experience.